I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. The date is April 16th, 2019, and we are meeting in the Joe N. Idelette Junior Teacher Education Center, and this is a special business meeting. And at this time, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, led by Mrs. Terry Berenborg.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. So at this time, we will have the adoptions of the order of the day. We do not have any items on the consent, so we do not have anything to move to action. At this time, I would like to call for a motion to adopt the orders of the day.
Move approval. I'll second.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Justice, do you care to speak to your motion?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Okay. Tonight we do not have our presentations that we normally get to enjoy at this time, but this is at the time that we will be taking citizen input. So I have one for right now, and then I have one for the action item that's on the agenda. So at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Mike Young up to the podium. Welcome.
Thank you guys for having me again.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. My name is Mike Young, and I'm the Director of Operations for Little League Baseball in Vero Beach. Over the last few months, I myself and other board members have come to share success stories from our season, updates, and little stories about our players, and reiterate our mission as a board to build superior citizens through America's sport of baseball. I feel like it was yesterday we were trying to figure out how in the world we were going to take this journey or start it in the first place, and here we are only a few weeks away from the end of our first spring season. As I've shared previously, we have had some huge wins this season, but the biggest of all of those wins will never be recorded in the scorebook. They're the stories that I hear from the parents that their coaches are checking in on their child's grades to make sure that they're succeeding academically, which means their child will work harder in school, which is ultimately the goal. It's the player that started out the season quiet and is now screaming how many outs there are before every play. And it's the pride that we see on their faces when they hold the American flag on the pitcher's mound and say the Little League pledge before every game. These are the things that count as wins for us. And when we look at the end of the season and we look back at the season we've had, we're pretty happy about the amount of wins we've had in that category. The time has come for us to meet with a committee on Thursday that will make a recommendation for future leasing at Thompson Rotary Field. I've had the pleasure of meeting with hundreds of business owners, parents, and community members that stand beside us as we move towards this momentous occasion. Currently, we are renting a field from the county that is a county-owned field, and while we are grateful, very grateful, for the county's allowing us to use that field, there are multiple organizations that use those fields. We do not have any kind of precedence over the county recreation department leagues, and it has caused us our biggest curveball of the season is figuring out scheduling. Luckily, I'm blessed to be a part of a board of directors that has overcome that hurdle without too much effort. They're a great group of guys, and they've figured it out. But moving forward, we as a board hope that you as our school board will help us to do right by the players and to solidify a home field for our players so that we have a place that they can call home and they can take pride in keeping up with and knowing that it's theirs. We currently have 240 children in our league, ranging from ages 4 to 12, and it is amazing to watch each and every one of them. We look forward to continuing our relationship here and continue to come here and speak every week or every month or however often you guys meet, for many, many years to come. And wanted to end by saying thank you again for all that you guys do. You don't hear it enough, I'm sure, and we really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this time, Mr. Young is the only one that we have signed up for the citizen input. Then we have, we do have one speaker for the action item. So at this time, we would typically go approve our consent agenda, and like I had said, we do not have a consent agenda tonight, so we're gonna move past that to the action item agenda for why we're here tonight. Action item A, discussion and potential action regarding April 10th, 2019 letter from Mr. Stivers. And this discussion and potential action on possible mutual separation agreement. The school board members will be provided an opportunity to discuss the letter and possibility to take action. For the public's knowledge, that the letter was in the backup, and I would like to read that letter because this is the discussion that we're going to be talking about. The letter is from Levine and Stivers, LLC, dated April 10th, 2019. Reference, Dr. Mark Rendell, Superintendent, Indian River School District. Dear Mrs. DeAgresta, the purpose of this letter is to follow up on the board's discussion session held yesterday, April 9th, as it relates to Dr. Rendell's employment contract. We reviewed the discussion, and it is apparent that the board desires to end its relationship with Dr. Rendell through a negotiated resolution. In an effort to begin the process of negotiating this resolution on behalf of our client, I have been authorized to make the following offer. The parties will enter into a mutual separation or third agreement that provides that, 1, Dr. Rendell will work in his current position through May 24, 2019. 2, Dr. Rendell will receive a payout in the amount of $62,545.60 in addition to any terminal pay as outlined in the employment agreement. 3, Dr. Rendell will not use any vacation days other than the days already approved through May 24th. 4, Dr. Rendell will only use sick leave for an emergency and previously scheduled medical appointment. 5, the parties agree that they and/or their representatives, agents, and/or employees will not disparage or otherwise sully the reputation of each other in any way relating to this agreement, including, without limitation, through any communications with other individuals, companies, vendors, associations, media, and other entities. It would be expressly understood that any violation of the non-disparagement provision may result in an application to a court for sanctions. And 6, the remaining provision of his employment agreement as amended will remain unchanged through May 24th, 2019. This offer shall remain open until April 17th, 2019. In the event this offer is not accepted by that time, it will become null and void by its terms. If you would like to discuss this matter, please feel free to give me a call. Sincerely, H.B. Stivers. So at this time, board members, I need a motion so that we can discuss this, and then I need a second.
Mrs. Sork, if I may.
Yes.
The school board can call a special meeting in a couple of different ways. The chair can call a special.
Can we open this up and then we
Yep,
can have that?
Absolutely, I'm
Okay,
going to
I
do
need a
that.
motion.
I would like to move that we ask our school board attorney to work with our superintendent's attorney to come up with a document, a mutual separation agreement we can approve as soon as possible.
Madam Chair,
that a
I make a
motion?
motion.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So Mrs. Rosario with a motion?
There is a pending motion, excuse me.
Okay.
There is a pending motion.
Mhm.
So you need to either have a second for that motion, or it dies for lack of a
Okay.
second.
Mrs. Zork, if I may,
Mhm.
this board has made it clear that they would like to end the superintendent's contract early. This board has made a statement that they would like to negotiate that early end. We have received a letter for a proposed mutual separation. I do believe that the relationship with the superintendent and the school board has been fractured beyond repair. And I do believe that the terms are reasonable and should be acceptable to us as a school board. Again, I move that we ask our school board attorney to work with our superintendent's attorney to come up with a document, a mutual separation agreement, that we can approve as soon as possible. The focus now for us as a board truly needs to be to act as respectfully and as responsibly as possible so that we can attract a high-quality candidate to lead this district going forward.
So is there a second to not have discussion about this tonight? Because that's my understanding, that tonight was to discuss the letter, which it states here, discuss and potential action regarding April 10th, 2019 letter from Mr. Stivers.
In strict adherence to Robert's rules, we would need to have a motion to be able to discuss it. You've asked for a motion, I've given you one. Perhaps we can discuss it after we move forward into discussion. It would be appropriate for you to call for a second at this time.
Based on your motion.
Yes, ma'am, that is the pending motion on the floor.
Mrs. DeAgresta, if we do not accept her motion, we move forward with this discussion, correct? If we get a first and a second.
You have a pending motion.
Uh-huh.
If you get a second, you then move forward to discussion of the motion or other issues as far as possible amendments to the motion. If this motion dies for lack of a second, then the next procedural issue would be to seek a different motion. Is there another motion that would get a second?
But we have a posted action agenda item.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So is there a second from Mrs. Justice motion?
Yeah, I'll second, because I don't see where they're not related. So I'm going to say second, please, so we can discuss this, and let's not picayune about words. Let's just get this done.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a first with Mrs. Justice, second with Mrs. Berenborg. At this time,
I would like to speak to my motion.
Excuse me, public comment? You have a
public
public comment
comment,
on
yes.
this item?
okay.
It would be appropriate to take the public
Is
comment.
it on her item, or is it on the item that's here?
I don't think I know the difference between the two.
Mrs. Orr,
It's my understanding, what I'm hearing, so tell me, is that she wants to move to have the, correct me if I'm wrong, she wants to move to have us direct you to negotiate with the superintendent's attorney. That's what I'm hearing the motions for. And then we discuss you moving forward to negotiate with the superintendent's attorney. Is that correct? Mrs. Justice?
I'm sorry, you're speaking to me. I'm sorry, yes. In fact, the superintendent has given us a letter. This board has made it clear that they would like to end this contract with the superintendent. In fact, in our April 23rd business meeting, there is an action item to not allow the superintendent's contract to renew and then to enter into negotiations with the superintendent's attorney, for our school board attorney to do that, to negotiate an early end to his contract or a separation agreement. The superintendent has provided us with a letter, and And this letter contains some terms that I feel are reasonable and should be acceptable to us as a school board. Again, I do believe that the focus now for us as a district needs to be to act as respectfully and responsibly as possible so that we can attract a high-quality candidate to lead this district forward. Asking that we discuss entering into that negotiation regarding these terms and any others that school board members might like to discuss. And let's move forward as respectfully and responsibly as possible.
Okay. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Mrs. Justice. What I'm trying to make sure is that if we have a motion and we have a vote in favor for Mrs. Justice motion, we were saying that it's the same as what's on the action agenda, because I have someone that wants to speak to action item A.
Mrs. Swart,
I'm
you're-
talking, no,
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, just for a moment.
No,
You have a
no.
motion, you have a
Mrs.
second, and
Justice,
it's time for public
please.
comment.
Please, Mrs. Justice. I'm not wanting to make this confrontational, but because of Robert's rules and because of certain guidelines I, as chairperson, have to follow, I want to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So I need to make sure if we take Mrs. Justice's motion, can Dr. Warrior speak to this item, or do we have to have a second motion to approve that, and then it's two different items is the way I see it. So please inform me.
Mrs. Orr, currently you're on action A. The school board is on action item A. And if you have a motion pending with regard to action item A, and if you have someone who's signed up to speak for public comment with regard to action item A, now would be the appropriate time. I'm not suggesting that the speaker will speak to
Right.
to Mrs. Justice's motion,
Okay.
but the public speaker would speak to the action item however they feel is appropriate, and then the board can have your discussion, and whether this motion or an alternate motion or amended motion
Okay.
actually passes, that's still to be
Okay.
seen
Okay.
after your discussion.
And that's where I'm
Yes,
trying
ma'am.
to get to.
I understand, thank you.
Okay. So Dr. Warrior, please come to the podium.
Good evening. Thank
Good
you for
evening.
the opportunity to speak. As a board, you've discussed the difficulty of the decision you have to make. I have followed your discussion and attempted to make sense of it all. When issues begin to seem so complicated that I'm struggling to understand and make a decision, then I try to simplify things. At the last discussion meeting, the board began to talk about a negotiated resignation settlement with Dr. Rendell. I know that I'm not feeling the pressure that you may be feeling, but I do know that I care deeply about the impact of the decisions that you do or do not make. I am confused by the negotiated resignation terminology that has been introduced into your conversation. I have read and reread Dr. Rendell's contract. It already specifies the terms for termination of the contract. We can either terminate with cause or without cause. For each choice, there's a specified procedure. Is it the word terminate that we're hesitant to use? As a board, you supported the termination of many other employees. As I read the second letter from Dr. Rendell, the one we're talking about tonight, from Dr. Rendell's attorneys, I began to realize that it looked amazingly similar to our contractual language of termination without cause. The glaring difference is that this proposal includes an extremely broad non-disparagement clause. I ask you as a citizen to not agree to a document that includes what amounts to a gag order. You are a public entity, and as such, the public has a right to ask questions about your choices and decisions. I ask you to act on what is already a part of the contract with the superintendent. We must move on. You must make a decision. Unfortunately, this is not an issue where time is allowing things to calm down. What often cures divisiveness is a decision. Then people know what they're working with, and they usually make accommodations. The wound was opened when the superintendent made his rightful choice to hire attorneys and noticed the school board that he was actively seeking employment elsewhere. Unfortunately, he also said he was unwilling to resign. This means that we're to sit by bleeding until the superintendent finds a job and then notifies us that we have 30 days to jump into action to find an interim superintendent. It is almost the end of April, and we have not even begun our budget process, which usually starts, I think, about March. As a new board, I believe you've stepped into difficult days ahead. Please do not leave a similar legacy for another board. Make the difficult decision now. This is when it will count. Please do not accept the letter before you tonight and use the already agreed on language to our contractual relationship with the superintendent as your basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wire. Okay, so we have Mrs. Justice with the motion. We have Mrs. Berenborg with the second. All in favor for this motion? Yes.
Call for any discussion amongst the board members of the pending motion.
Okay. So, Mrs. Justice, would you like to speak to your motion?
I believe I've stated what I'd like to state. Again, I will make it clear. What is in the best interest of the district is to be able to have the time to find an interim superintendent and then enter into a contract with a search firm to work to attract a high-quality candidate to lead this district forward. I believe that the work we are doing as a school board currently right now is being watched very carefully by potential candidates. And I think it is in the best interest of our students, our families, our teachers, and our community that we act as respectfully and responsibly as possible going forward so that we may attract a high-quality candidate to come to lead this district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Berenborg with your second.
Yes, I wanted to talk about all the different options that we have. Because I was quite confused on a couple of different numbers that I was given. And I want to do what's best for all parties. My interest is for the school district, and I need to make sure that we are doing what's best for us and to be financially safe. And when asking for information, quite frankly, I was given different numbers from different people, so I'm not quite sure if I have all the information. That's what I thought our discussion was going to be tonight, where we could sit and talk about, okay, if we do this, this is what it's going to cost us. If we do this, this is what it's cost us. I think some people are confused about the fact that if we do something else, it's going to cost us more money because you're getting into legal issues and you're getting into more lawyers and dragging it out. So I think we need to talk about basically what the options are. And I think Dr. Schiff kind of brought that forward in our last discussion about, we have different options and we didn't have any data and numbers. And I do have some numbers, but I'm not quite sure if they're the same numbers you have. So maybe if we could discuss that, Mrs. Zork, and see if everybody comes up with the same numbers I came up with. Okay?
Okay.
Is that
Thank
okay?
you. Mhm.
All right. So what the attorney's asking for in the payout, which figuring on the 62,545.60, is a payroll receipt for 13 weeks, which he sent us a follow-up email, which you didn't read, which says that any work that he works towards that
Want to
date.
read that?
I don't have it with me.
Okay, I do have that, so.
You want to read it?
Yes,
It's right here, Mrs. Sword.
thank you. Let me just put it. Okay. We did receive an email yesterday from Mrs. Diagresta, and it was to all the board members, and it was, and I'll read what it says. It says, "Dear school board members, I received a phone call from Dr. Rendell's attorney, Mr. Stivers, this morning. He wanted to clarify the information contained in paragraph 2 in the attached letter. Mr. Stivers indicated the offer of a payout in the amount of $62,545.60 was meant to be the total payout from the date of the letter through May 24, 2019. In other words, any payroll received by Dr. Rendell between April 10, 2019 and May 24, 2019, approximately 7 weeks, would be deducted from the $62,545.60, and whatever remained of the payout of May 24, 2019, approximately 13 weeks, would then be paid to Dr. Rendell.
Okay. So with that being said, the way I looked at it is this option, with what the attorney's asking for, is $62,545.60, plus vacation days, sick days, taxes, and workers' comp, which would be paid anyway, we do this. And then insurance, which is the question I have. So there's $7,087.84 for the vacation days, sick days, and some of the taxes. I'm not quite sure if the insurance or the other stuff was $28,366.24. Not quite sure what insurance we'd be paying for, if it was for a year or for just from now until he leaves his employment. But that number altogether that I came up with was $97,999.68 with the question about the insurance. However, when I called today in finance, the estimate I was given was $94,000 for that. So I'm not quite sure if that's taking the days out from what we just heard, or if not. So that's this option. The next option is contract payout, and that is $62,545.60 plus taxes and everything else. Plus, there is terminal pay, and a contract payout would be $130,132.76, so quite a bit more. Termination with cause. We must give him a 30-day written notice of the cause and an opportunity for him to cure the cause. He can sue the board for breach of contract after that. If we are found guilty, then he still gets the 20 weeks and terminal pay, and I'm not quite sure if there was a penalty.
Mrs. Bamber, can you repeat that?
Sure. For the termination with cause. So I'm going to his contract, and if you'll look at his contract, I'm not sure if you have it in front of you. Read it right from there. Okay, so with cause, it says in Article 1, it's B, page 7 of 21, B, termination for cause, number 1. Within that first paragraph, you'll see without first giving the superintendent 30 days prior written notice of the cause and an opportunity for the superintendent to cure such cause by initiating corrective action in good faith regarding the cause specified in such notice within 30-day period of time. So we have to give 30-day notice. He can also, if you look further down, he can also sue us for breach of contract. If we are found guilty, then he still gets the 20 weeks and terminal pay, and the question of penalty was a question I had for our attorney. Then the fourth option is termination without cause. Termination without cause is terminal pay plus base salary without other benefits, including monetary benefits of 20 weeks plus the date of the board vote to terminate, which is the same cost as before, which was, I'm not quite sure on the final number on that because of the including monetary benefits of 20 weeks from the date of the board vote to terminate. So we'd have to terminate, and then that would be 20 weeks after that of pay. Okay. So the other options to me can be very costly. So I'm concerned about financial issues. I know people feel like, you know, we need to terminate. But I also think if you can get into that, you're going to start getting attorneys, and our attorney bills are going to go up. We're going to wind up with a much more costly result.
Thank you. To get clarification on some of your questions, I need to understand the way that this is proposed, Mrs. Diagresta. Can you, we don't have someone from finance here, but the health is included in, do you want to read that?
Have the numbers.
Okay. Do you want to read it?
I have two handouts, one of which was a chart that was given to you all. Take that in an email, but I got a little bit of clarification. Here, you could take one and pass it around, and then one to Nancy, if possible. So we'll go by that first one first. May I ask Mrs. Diagresta a question first before we move into this? Mrs. Diagresta, with regard to what Mrs. Barenborg just mentioned, we are entering.
Which?
I'm gonna clarify now. We are entering into a negotiation period with a resignation from Dr. Rendell. That was the discussion and the agreement as of last discussion session. That does not include a termination with or without cause. So as we are entering into these negotiations, does the part in his contract that would hold us liable legally to violate his contract, does that become null and void because we are agreeing to enter into a negotiated deal for resignation?
That's what you're supposed to be discussing this evening, is whether the board is interested in entering into negotiations with Dr. Rendell through his lawyer to come up with a mutual separation agreement. So it wouldn't be a termination. It would be essentially, we're separating. It's like a divorce. I hate to use that word, but you're separating from employment. It's not a termination.
Okay.
It would be a mutual separation.
So we don't have to worry about being sued for violating his contract in that way?
If we are able to reach agreement, absolutely.
Okay.
There would be specific terms set out in writing, similar to what Mr. Sivers has put in his letter to the board. And if we are able to reach agreement, both parties would sign. The school board would approve the agreement, and Dr. Rendell, through his lawyer, would also approve the agreement, and everybody would sign.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Diagresta. So this chart that we all received from Dr. Rendell, we received on April 9th, I believe. It indicates some numbers of a payout based on 3 dates that we identified in our last discussion session. The first date was ending work on May 31st. The second was June 30th, and the third was July 31st. If you look in that first column of the $62,545.60, that number is the same number that is what is in the recommendation from Dr. Rendell's lawyer. So I wondered where that number came from. So I went to payroll directly. That number, and you all have it there on your form too. It's all the way to the left, underneath Dr. Rendell's, top left, underneath Dr. Rendell's name. It says, based on 20 weeks, estimated at 97 contract days. That is that number. So essentially, Dr. Rendell received a number that would have been the number he would have received had we terminated without cause. If we terminated his contract with cause, language in his contract would have given him his salary, vacation days, plus an additional 20 weeks, right? That's what this is, the 20 weeks. So that's where that number came from. 20 weeks would be equivalent to 62,545.60. And that's why it says it on here, from payroll that came to us from Dr. Rendell based on 20 weeks. So 20 weeks of his salary is 62,545.60. His vacation value for each one of those days is obviously there. And then we end up at total gross. So let's just look at May 31st, for example. Total gross would be the 20 weeks plus the vacation days. That would be 71,653.40. Now, here is where you would add what is in that small little, where the asterisk is that says includes, you would add 33.31% to the total gross. And that 33.31% is the total district costs. That would be Social Security, Medicare, retirement, workers' compensation. It does not include health insurance contributions, but I was told that that is not a lot. And I was also told that it depends on the end date and where they are at the end of the, in the term, up until whenever he decides to leave. But I was told it shouldn't be a big amount right now. But right now, that 33.31% is to be added to the total gross. If you add 33.31% to 71,653.40, it equates to that little number there that I wrote in pencil, which would bring us to our total payout. It should be $95,521.15. Maybe that small little difference would be the health insurance contribution. But anyway, it should be $95,521. If this is what it would be. However, I then, somehow or another, I started asking, I just wanted to see his regular pay. And this is where you'll be able to compare. I just wanted to see his regular pay. You can take this.
Mrs. Rosario?
Let me get one, please. I'm sorry.
Matt, Mrs. Rich had sent us an email earlier that did,
This is it.
okay, she did say what the health insurance was. It was $540 a month plus, I think, $6.42 for life insurance.
Oh, okay,
So
okay, yeah. Okay.
542.
Okay, so this this chart here was sent to us today from Kathleen Rich, our payroll manager. She and I were going back and forth because I couldn't figure out where Dr. Rendell was getting the $62,000 from. So I just wanted to know salary. If his contract were to end on the same dates there, let's look at May 31st to compare. If his contract, or if his work were to end on May 31st, the number of contract days from now until May 31st would be 37. His daily rate of regular salary would be $644.80 a day. His contract value in salary only would be $23,857.60. His vacation days would be $9,107.80. And that is because he has over 113 hours accrued. The total gross for this, what we're looking at, is $32,965.40. Add your 33.31% to that, and you would get a total of $43,103.70. So essentially, if he were to work until May 31st, his total salary would be $43,103.70, just salary alone with vacation, salary with vacation. I should say, not salary alone, salary with vacation. So then I went back to this chart to compare, and as I was talking with payroll, I said, something is off because I still couldn't figure out what was happening here. It turns out that in my writing that you see sideways, in my pencil writing, he's asking for 20 weeks worth of pay, which is $62,545.60. According to the letter that we received from Mrs. D'Agresta this morning, on the 15th, it indicates that he is requesting his regular payroll between 410 and 524 be subtracted from the $62,545.60. That would bring us to $41,266.60. Again, going back to the letter from Mrs. D'Agresta, whatever remains of the payout would then be paid to Dr. Rendell. So essentially, what we're looking at is a payout of $41,266.60. That is what his payout. That is his total payout. So according to this, and according to what he's asking, okay? So right here, he's asking for $62,545.60 minus payroll for 410 to 524 equates to $41,266.60. And according to this letter, that's what he would then be paid. Now, it still doesn't make any sense to me because his regular pay, what is left to be paid for him for the next 11 weeks is on the bottom of that page for you. 11 weeks to be paid would be $33,583.27.
Where are you?
It's still
This is
on the
very-
bottom here.
Oh, and you're writing.
Yeah,
I
in
don't
my writing.
Understand the 11.
Okay.
So his salary, what is supposed to be paid to him, is still less than what we're seeing here. I don't know, and if we are voting now essentially, or offering what we are suggesting, this board member is not in favor of paying him 20 weeks. I want to certainly negotiate that. I do not believe that $62,545.60 is something that we should negotiate on. So I am not in favor of that. I am in favor of discussing another payout if you all want to go there. I'm actually just considering withdrawing my consent to offer anything at all and just move for termination without cause. If that's where we have to go, then that's where we have to go. But I do agree with what Mrs. Justice said, that we need to work professionally and respectfully, and that would mean not interrupting the board chair as she is speaking, and give the board chair the respect that she deserves here at the dais. But with that being said, I'm willing to hear whatever you all would have to say from here on. If I may also add, I am not in favor of Dr. Rendell ending his contract on May 24th. We have way too many things going on. May 24th is the last day of tests. I do believe that he should stay at least until May 29th, which is the last day of teachers, the last day that teachers have. Give teachers the respect that are due to them to have their superintendent remain until that last day. In fact, I would even extend it past May 28th or 29th or whatever it might be, so that we can get some end of the year closing work done and make sure that things are in place before he actually leaves. I am not going to agree, nor will I sign, nor will I offer a vote, nor do I even want to discuss a gag order. My number one priority as an elected official is to the voters of this county. My number one priority is to full transparency, and being tied to a gag order, which I completely understand where he's coming with that, but to tie our hands with this gag order would mean that under no circumstances can we ever bring up anything that may be perceived as disparaging. And if indeed it is perceived as disparaging, then we would be sued. And that would mean that we cannot be fully transparent on any of our work moving forward, anything that is tied to Dr. Rendell, when in fact everything is tied to him going back to the day that he started working here. I find that, in fact, to be disrespectful to our work. I find that request to only mean that there might be some things that are not wanting to be said. And I find great worry in that. So those are my main points.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just moving down, so Dr. Schiff.
Few things. I agree both with Mrs. Justice about respect and however we choose to move forward terming our relationship, that we do that with the greatest degree of respect and decorum possible. That said, I also agree that the way that this non-disparagement clause is written, I am also not in favor of it, mostly because it's way too vague. It's far too vague to characterize what disparagement would mean, and I am concerned that without more specificity, I don't know what's included in the perception of non-disparagement, and I would want that laid out much more clearly. I am also concerned that unless it is very clear and specific, that board members could inadvertently and unintentionally meander into difficult waters that are perceived as disparagement, whether it was intended as such or not. So unless there's greater clarity on non-disparagement, I agree. The way this is written, I'm not in favor of it. That said, Mrs. Rosario, I'm confused by what you just said in a couple of places, and I'll just, without going through all of it, I'm going to mention a couple of them that are particularly confusing to me in what you just laid out. Specifically, you said, I'm not willing to pay the $62,545.60. A termination without cause requires that we pay 20 weeks. This is not a choice. If we terminate without cause, we are obligated to pay that $62,000 plus benefits. You're right, there's a miscalculation here, so thank you for finding that. But by terms of the contract, we don't get to say, no thanks, we don't want to. We are bound by that contract, whatever you or anybody may think about it. We are obligated to that 20 weeks if we choose the route of termination without cause. We're obligated to the $62,000 plus the assorted benefits, which as of May 31st equals about $95,000. There's not an option. That's what it is. These numbers, terminating without contract but without cause by any of these dates results in this figure. It's not negotiable. That's the contract. So if you were suggesting something else, I'm not sure where you were getting. Hang on one second. In addition, the number that you mentioned, the $41,266, if we were to honor in the attorney's letter, subtracting the days between April 10th and May 24th, for this number 41, that's not a final payout. That does not include the 33% of these sets of benefits. That's not the final number. The number is this plus the 33%, and I haven't calculated that.
exactly.
Of course it's more.
Yeah.
Of course it's more, but I want it to be clear, because what you said is that the final payout would be 41,266, and that's not right. So I don't want that floating out there in the space as a number, because it's not the right number.
Gotcha.
That said, what we're here to discuss is whether or not we are accepting this letter. That's it. So, based on what I just said about my concerns with the non-disparagement clause, I don't want to accept this letter. That's what we're here to discuss. We're not here to discuss all of the other things. That's on the agenda for April 23rd. If we want to move that up to discuss it now, then that's a different conversation. That's a conversation about what are we doing, how are we moving forward, and what are we authorizing Ms. DeGresta to do. The conversation we're here to talk about tonight is simply, do we accept this letter or not? That's it. So, that's where I am.
That was not the motion that I made. I would like the opportunity for the school board to discuss the terms of this letter, whether they are acceptable or not to the school board, and perhaps any modifications or amendments. Again, any mutual separation agreement that was negotiated with the superintendent's attorney and with our school board attorney would have to be brought back to us for approval. So I'm not saying that, I believe the terms of this are acceptable. I do believe that the payout ends up being less than a 20-week termination without cause, and as someone who considers herself to be very important that I am a good steward of taxpayer dollars, seeing that this number actually ends up being less than a termination without cause, straight payout, to me makes fiscal sense. That's why I felt it important that we had a duty to discuss this. Again, the school board, board corporate can choose to move forward in any fashion, but I did ask to have this meeting, to have this discussion tonight about this letter, because I felt that we had a duty to discuss it, as termination without cause in the future will be more costly to the taxpayers of Indian River County.
May I respond? That is what I heard to be the discussion between your motion and the motion that was here that Mrs. Zork was asking about and was asking for clarification from Ms. DeGresta. We were here on the motion, do we accept the letter or not? You entered a different motion to forward the conversation about do we, first it requires a conversation about do we accept the letter. If we don't accept the letter, then we move forward with a different conversation, which we are already noticed to have next week. I think taking a breath here is kind of important.
Sure. I just want to let you know, I did work with our school board attorney to word that motion so that it would allow us the opportunity for conversation regarding any possible amendments or future negotiation, so that we could handle it this evening. Again, there was a deadline on the letter. I'm not going to comment about whether or not I like that, but I did believe we had a duty to discuss it as a board.
Having also, sorry.
Can, Mrs. Berenborg?
Thank you.
And then Dr. Schiff.
If you'll go,
Respond to Dr. Schiff before. so I
Okay,
need to-
Mrs. Berenborg, Mrs. Rosario, and Dr. Schiff.
thank you. If you go back to the action agenda, it says discussion and potential action regarding April 10th. So that's why I thought, okay, well, I heard Mrs. Zork very clearly in our discussion, the last discussion we had, that said she'd be willing to enter into a negotiation of separation. And when we got this letter the very next day from the attorney, I went, oh, he obviously was watching, which he was. And, you know, that's what I heard you say. So that's what I thought we were discussing tonight. I thought we were discussing whether or not we're going to do that. Again, I'm looking at all the options and whether or not, how much it's going to cost us. And I'm looking at termination without pay or without cause and termination with cause, and either way, it's going to cost us more money. So termination with cause is going to cost us more. Without cause, it's going to potentially cost us a lot more. So I think we need to tread very lightly here. And I also am concerned about the fact that, okay, so we are definitely going to separate with our superintendent. So now that we know that, we need to make sure that we're putting a good face out there for the next person we want to have walk through the door and trust us as a board.
Yes.
And, you know, we all went through the same training, and that training says we need to go through our superintendent when we want to talk to staff. We need to go through our superintendent when we want to do that. This is a broken relationship, I get that, and that's why I understand people are going to staff directly. However, we need to know that the next person in here is going to know that we're going to do that we're going to trust them because we're in good faith hiring this next person. They're watching this meeting. And so we need to be very careful with how we handle this, because anybody that goes into a position is excited about the potential of a new job, but they also, if they're really smart about it, are thinking about the what ifs. What happens if this doesn't work out? And what are my options? And so, you know, this contract was negotiated before all of us. And it is what it is. Those 20 weeks are definitely in there. And so we have to honor it. We can't break that contract, otherwise we're looking at more litigation and more attorney fees, and I don't think we want to go there. So I think looking at that versus, you know, do we terminate or he resigns, and, you know, does it really matter at this point that we just need to move on and allow us to say, let's negotiate. Now, I don't want to accept this letter per se. I do have a question with number 5. I do. I think it's going to lead us into a concern that I'm concerned about if a board member says something on the dais, and there we go. So I'm a little nervous about that. But I also think that what this is asking us is, would we be willing to come back? A negotiation is a negotiation. You don't just accept what's here. You say, no, you know, we'd rather do this. And so I think this is our job to decide whether or not we want to accept this or alter this. And I'm willing to say, let's alter this and let's get this done. And I agree with you, though, Ms. Rosario, as far as the date. I'm a little confused as to why May 24th. Dr. Rendell might have a reason for that. I would love to see that we have our superintendent through the end of the school year. And then when schools are closed, then maybe that's a good time for us to move on. But I'm not quite sure why he has that date in mind. That's the date we were given. So again, that's a negotiated piece. We can negotiate the date. We can negotiate the options. We can negotiate them out. We can negotiate anything here. And I'd be willing to say, you know what, I think Ms. DeGresta can go to bat for us and see what she comes up with and come back to us and say, this is our next option. And we have time. We can do that by next week. We have a meeting next week. We can put that on our agenda. She can come back to us and say, this is what has been brought back to us, and we can either agree or we can say, let's go on with the rest of our agenda. But at least we have that option out there.
Can I, Dr. Rendell, can I ask, so we understand the May 24th date, what is the significance to that date to help us understand?
Mrs. Cannon, do you have the date, the last day for teachers to work?
Teachers go to the 29 students, the 24th, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, that's what I said.
So it's just picked because that was the last date the students are there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right. Thank you for that.
May I, please? Mrs. Sork?
Mhm.
Thank you. Mrs. Berenborg, I think that
Already called some people.
But this is her, I know, her comment is related to
Okay.
our question, I'm assuming.
I want to thank you for opening up the idea that we do discuss some of the terms, and I think asking for May 29th, the last day of teachers, would be appropriate. And I think that that's something that, I don't think it would be appropriate to kind of negotiate. I think that it's appropriate for the school board attorney to negotiate with the superintendent's attorney. But I think that that is an amendment that I would be fine with. I would think is reasonable and acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Rosario?
I wanted to touch on a comment that that Dr. Schiff made regarding the 41,000. I just want to clarify that when I mentioned that as a payout, what I was referring to was what the letter was saying to be paid to. So the last line simply says that this would be paid to Dr. Rendell. That's what I was referring to. So I understand how I may have said it may have been confusing, but that's what because that was my question, is after all of this, it says what would be left would then be paid to Dr. Rendell, so I couldn't figure out what was left. So that's how I figured out what was left, by doing that calculation. The 41,266.60 was what would be left to refer to this. So I apologize if that was confusing to you before.
Okay. Is it related to, Mrs. Bamberg, is it related to that?
Yes, I hope so. If it isn't, we can skip it and move on. I'm
Wait, hold on
very
1 second.
concerned, it's
She
about
had it.
dates. Is that okay? I'm just very concerned with, should Dr. Rendell leave on May 24th or May 29th, or whenever Board Corporate decides to negotiate that, that might be, I'm worried about our budget process. I'm worried about our budget workshops. I'm worried about, putting them together. I'm worried about the support that our finance department is gonna need, so that we can approve a budget, midsummer. I'm very worried about that. So I wanna throw that out there because that's something that is weighing very heavy on the date aspect of all of this. And I do believe that we need to move forward, but that's something that, I know that we're gonna get through it. I know that we're gonna be able to get through it. I'm just concerned about that.
Okay, thank you. Is that a follow-up? Because Dr. Schiff was next.
No, she can go.
Okay.
I'll hold my thought.
Okay. Thank you.
Can you clarify, Ms. Berenberg, what I think I heard you said was that a termination without cause would cost more than a termination with cause. Did I hear you say that correctly?
No, what I said is, yes, without cause, sorry, going back. With cause would cost potentially a lot more.
With cause would cost
Because,
more than without cause.
because his attorney could
I agree.
file
I thought I
suit.
heard you say it the other way
No,
around, and I
no.
wanted to
No, I wanted to go
disagree
back
with
to my
that.
note. It's, a termination with cause would potentially cost us a lot more.
Yes. In consideration of, first off, I also just really want to acknowledge how difficult this conversation is for everybody who's here. It's a hard conversation to have in this way that we have to have it, and it's, to sit and be talked about in the third person is difficult. That said, the conversation about dates I am also concerned with, but what I don't know, because I haven't been through this process, is how does the search for an interim work? How do we do that? Who handles that? Mrs. Zork, do you go out and say people? Does the board come and discuss it? Do we reach out to people? How does that process work? And how does that get accomplished? How do you envision that that gets accomplished within 30 days? Because I'm in the dark for how that happens.
So you're asking me?
I'm
Okay.
asking whoever has the answer. I don't know the answer.
Well, there's several different ways that we could go about this. So the research I found is that we could contract with a search team to gather the resumes, and then we could choose that way. We could have, for example, FSBA or whatever search team it is, but I do know that FSBA does offer that service to its members. For the non-members, it starts at $5,000.
I'm sorry, it starts at 5,000 for them, as non-members, for them to assist us in identifying an interim. Thank you.
So that's why you will see posted today on our agenda for next Tuesday. I do have on there an action item to discuss becoming a member. And I went ahead and put that on there as an option, because first of all, I've not said anything, but one of the concerns I have with the number one item, current position through May 24th, at this time, I don't have enough information. I really need to know from the professionals, what is the timeline? Do we have to post it? You know, who gets the resumes? Who does the background checks? So I don't have enough of that information because this was posted on Friday and I didn't have time to really gather that because I was thinking that we were going to talk about this on April 23rd. We could, if it's the board's consensus is we could ask FSBA to come in and they could talk about the interim process and what they typically see during these times. And they will give us the option, you know, do we have someone in-house that we could tap and say, we would like you to take this on? That's one question. Is there someone in the community that is available that we could tap to take this on? Or is it, you know, do we hire FSBA to do, or not hire, if we're a member, we don't have to hire them? Or is there another search firm that does this for, you know, specific to school districts?
And so as chair, you will gather all that information, is that correct?
My recommendation as chair and as a board member is that we bring the FSBA in and allow them to talk about this process because this is my first time going through it and I feel like if they're available, why aren't we asking the professionals who do this? So I would like to set a date for them to come in and talk about this. And I did reach out to them. I did talk to Andrea yesterday, and I believe she told me that, I'm trying to make sure that, I did talk to Andrea yesterday, and she did say that she was available April 29th or May 1st to come in.
Mrs. Orr,
Yes.
would there be a cost for that?
If we are members, no.
So if we invite her to come in on the 29th, then we'd have to pay for her to come in, just to talk to us about it.
Well, we have on the, and this, again, this is what I was going to talk to the board about on April 23rd, is the options. If we are members, then there is not a cost for her to come in and talk about this.
Okay, then, can I follow up with that?
Absolutely.
Can I ask, what did we do the last time when Pat Pritchett came in, Dr. Pritchett? Ms. DeGresta, were you the attorney then?
My firm was providing legal services for the school board. I simply don't remember how he was selected. I know there was a process for selecting him, but I simply don't remember how he was selected.
Okay, I'll have to go back and I guess,
It-
can't really research that because it's not
We
going to be on
we
video.
don't have the videos. I tried to look at the minutes, because the videos that I saw online only went back to 2011. That day that I brought Dr. Pritchett in, you know, he was willing to answer any questions that we had. So I will provide every board member with his number, and he said, any questions that you have, that you're more than welcome to reach out to him and ask him. But that specific question, I do remember that they went through an interview process, but I don't know if they went through FSBA or not.
I'm familiar with what happened in the district that I'm in and another district, and we did have someone within house step in. And so there was no cost to the district. There was a person that was readily available, that everybody was comfortable with. As a matter of fact, she was my supervisor and wound up becoming the superintendent because she did such a good job. Not that I think Dr. Pritchett would like to become our superintendent again, but I think.
He said he is enjoying retirement and playing golf, and he's not interested in coming back.
Okay. So that being said, can we get back to this topic? Can I bring us back to, you mentioned the word options. I would like to have the option of allowing our school board attorney to send back what we think in this letter we would like to see changed and come up with our version of what we want to possibly negotiate to see if we can even do a better deal than what we've got here. And then we have that option on the 23rd to vote on it. and decide if that's the way we want to go. And I think that way we have our ability to give input, because this is our contract that we're dealing with, and then we can at least have an option. I'd rather do that than shoot down the option.
Okay, so I am going, oh, I'm sorry, I saw your head nod. Was that okay for me?
Go ahead.
I'm going to, actually, I'm rethinking the date of the 29th, and I'm going to ask the board to consider May 31st or June 28th. May 31st isn't a regular end of the month of May, obviously. Teachers leave May 29th. That gives the superintendent a couple of extra days to finish out the month of May. That is one proposal. June 28th could actually help the superintendent to remain in position and help move the budget forward. Our last budget workshop is June 25th. And so if he leaves on June 28th, he would be able to get us through that, and then we could begin moving forward from then. So those are the two dates that I propose to fellow board members for those reasons. I'm also asking for the board members to consider, and since no one else is throwing out a number, I'll just throw out a number. I don't even know how this works. But a quarter of the 20 weeks is something that I'm thinking of. Regular salary only plus a quarter of the 20 weeks.
Okay.
That's it.
Can I ask, we keep talking about a date, but have we put together a timeline of what we need to do to be prepared?
I asked Dr. Rundell that specifically in an email just this week. He just replied to me this morning and said there is no specific timeline of things to do.
But for us, as a board, to be prepared to post for an interim, to look at applications, to make an offer to an interim, what salary are we gonna give an interim? You know, we have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And
That's why I'm suggesting if we can reconsider the dates, it'll give us some play for us to have further discussion of who and how we want to select an interim rather than being rushed.
go ahead.
Well, and I get that, because the rush part is, it's important to know the end date because we have to have an interim superintendent named. And it doesn't have to be the person that we think is going to be here for a year. It can be a person that's going to be here for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I also don't think we have to advertise that and solicit resumes and all that. I think if we have somebody in mind, or if we know of somebody that we want to tap, that we can make that decision as a board and then revise it if it doesn't work out, because I've seen that too. So I do know that we absolutely have to know what the date is, though, so that we have somebody in place. I'm a little concerned about June 28th, only because one of the concerns that started all this was that he applied for another position. So if we put down June 28th and he gets another job, then we're out of luck as far as, you know, having that 30-day window.
No, he's got to work by I mean, we would agree to it. If he's going to violate that, then he violates his contract.
I think we would be in a good situation if he got the position, because then he would give us his resignation and we don't have any payout.
Yep.
True.
So, but, Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Zork, to refer to what Mrs. Barenborg just mentioned, and also piggybacking off of a question from FSBA, if I remember correctly, during the last discussion session, I think you said that the FSBA was willing to come in for that first talk with us for free. So if she were to come in on whenever, April something, because we haven't invited her yet, would that still be complimentary for us, that first initial meeting? Because I remember you mentioned
Right.
that.
At that time, she did offer to come in for free, so that she could talk about the processes, the timelines of a
Right.
superintendent search. My understanding, when I spoke with her yesterday, she, you know, the reality is that there's been a lot of hours being accumulated through free counseling and advice up to this point. So she did say that if we were to utilize them for the interim superintendent search, it could be $5,000 or more. It implied that we would need to be members for her to come in and talk about that. But I could call her and I can clarify that and have that answer on the 23rd for all of you.
And the question that you offered was, you offered 2 dates of which we could invite her in. One was April 29th, you said?
She had said that she was going to be going down. Keep in mind, she's in Tallahassee, so she was going to be in West Palm on the 30th. So she offered the day before or the day after. And she said because she was traveling, there would not be any charge to our district for the travel.
On April 29th, would that be a daytime or in the evening? Because in the evening, we have scholarship night, but I would be available all day if that's the case. The sooner the better. I just wanted to give you my thoughts on that.
Okay.
Mrs. Orr?
Mrs. Justice
It's fine,
had a
Mrs. Boone.
comment.
That's fine. I'll wait.
Okay. Mrs.
Um,
Hayward.
Can we get back to this, trying to get down to what it is on this letter that we would like to see our side negotiate? So you mentioned the dates. Maybe our other board members would like to chime in on what date you would like to see our attorney negotiate for.
I'd like to make a comment. May I?
Go ahead.
On the date? May I? Thank you. I'm a little confused because I don't share the concerns regarding our superintendent. This is a place that I have publicly said I did not want to be. I believe he's led this district well, and I have confidence in his ability to do so. But again, as I've said, I recognize that the relationship has been fractured beyond repair, and I do believe it's in the best interest of all parties, our students, our families, the school district, our staff, to move forward, finding a leader that the school board can trust and have faith in to go through the budget process. I don't necessarily understand why some of my fellow board members that have expressed that they do not feel confident in the superintendent and do not trust in his ability to go through the budget process, or in the past going through the budget process, would want to see us continue to build a budget in that way. I think that it would be appropriate for us to build a budget with whatever leadership we can continue to move forward with. So unless I've misheard people, I feel that it's in the best interest of our students and our families for us to find a superintendent the school board can put trust in and can help us to move forward. I would be comfortable with a May 31st date, a May 29th date. I respect the fact that it seems that Dr. Rendell wanted to stay on for students to be able to get through the end of the school year. That is in line with everything I've ever seen him do, which is put students first.
Can I can appreciate what your concerns are, which you said something that is very, very true, that we need to make sure that we have someone in place that we trust to help us put the budget together. So I don't want to go from one fractured relationship to someone I don't even know, who we've rushed to put in place to help us through this transition period. At this time, I'm concerned that we are very short-staffed in our management leadership. We're short-staffed with our CFO. We're short-staffed with the CFO is also supposed to be overseeing HR, And I know that this is a very busy time for curriculum and instruction to start building and getting prepared for the next school year. So when I look at who internally would we ask to do this, I feel like we are on such a skeleton crew that I wouldn't want to neglect our other obligations and pull them and ask them to take this on right now. And that's why, to me, it's important that, I do agree with Mrs. Berenborg that we could have someone for a couple of weeks, but to me, it's more important that we have someone that we trust as the interim to help us smooth out the waters, to get through this season until we find a new superintendent. That new superintendent hopefully can come in and hit the ground running, because we've had someone like a Dr. Pritchett who's overseen the district and has it ready to go. So that's just my concerns right now. I don't even, to me, I don't even know how long it would take to get an interim. I don't know how long that process is, and that's all I'm asking for, because I really was thinking we were gonna have this conversation on Tuesday, so I was still looking into this, so.
Mrs. Rick, if I may, one of the things that I saw in the proposed mutual separation agreement was the fact that Dr. Rendell said he would not be using his vacation days or sick days. So he would in fact be working the days that were through May 24th, as it's stated, or perhaps another date. In any other case, that he may not be actually actively working. I'm comfortable with your suggestion of moving forward with working with FSBA to find a proper interim superintendent. I think that that's a smart recommendation. I think it's a neutral party to work with to help us to move forward and make good, solid, responsible decisions going forward as a board. The most important thing to me truly at this point is setting up a new superintendent for success within our district. I feel we have a responsibility as a board to do that.
Absolutely, I totally agree, appreciate that. So can we, since we're not coming to a date at the moment, can we move down the list, and maybe there are some,
I was going to
some
suggest, can we
items
at least,
that we can at
come up with
least
something?
agree on and move on. So,
Can we delete number 5?
well, I think we need to talk about number 5. There's obviously a reason that Dr. Rendell felt the need to put that in there. Not that I agree with it, but a disparagement clause is very, very common during these type of situations. But again, I feel like it is very vague, and what I would like to say is the parties agree that they or their representatives, agents, and/or employees will not disparage. So I have underlined agents, representatives, employees.
Yeah.
The only person I have control of is me.
Right.
So that makes me very, very uncomfortable that we would put ourselves in that situation. This is, my fellow board members might disagree with me on this. I do feel like it's very vague. But the way I would feel more comfortable if we're in the spirit of negotiating and trying to come to a resolution together, I feel like the parties agree that the board members, and leave it at that, and with confined, and remove the portion that I think we should be able, in the confines of board business, during a board business meeting, we should be able to openly talk about issues. Now, if, where I would be, where I will compromise on this is, if I have anything to say about Dr. Rendell, it will be during a posted business meeting or a posted meeting. You know, I'm okay with not talking to individuals, companies, vendors, associations, media, and other entities, but I feel like when we come together to do board business, I feel like we need to have that ability to talk freely without worrying about him coming back and suing us for that. So that's my opinion. Go ahead.
Can I respond to that? Or add to that? I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate the need to do this as respectfully as possible. But not disparage is too vague for me. I need to know what constitutes disparagement, and I need to know it very specifically. Because if I or the board is going to be held to, it's expressly understood that any violation of the non-disparagement provision may result in the application to a court for sanctions. I want to know exactly, as close as possible, what that means.
Can I give you this?
Give me what?
I asked Mrs. Diagrasto, what is the non-disparagement clause and the derogatory comments. So I want board members to read this because you are correct. It's very, the parties expressly agree not to make any derogatory, false, belittling, disparaging, negative remarks regarding the others. This provision shall not be construed to prevent the boards or superintendent from complying with the public disclosure obligations imposed by Florida's public records and open government laws. So yes, you were very, I do agree that it is very vague. So if we want to work on this, how would we want to see it worded? Or would we want to leave that up to the attorney to work on the wording?
I think it's appropriate for us to have a conversation with her, but I think there may be things that these words imply in a legal setting that I'm not familiar with, because I'm not an attorney. But I want to know that, for example, if I say something that to me is innocuous, you know, I don't like the way the superintendent dresses. To me, that feels like a pretty innocuous comment. Could that be construed as disparagement or belittlement? I mean, I feel like there is a level at which we need to understand what's above and what's below the line on this. And I'm not sure, and Ms. DeGresta, maybe you can answer this, if someone were to violate that, if that's done in a public setting here, that opens the board to legal sanction, correct? So it's not, so if a board member says something, it is not, where is the line drawn between where the board is held responsible and where an individual is held responsible, and what does that mean in a legal sense for who can be, result in an application to a court for sanctions?
May I?
Yes.
It's going to depend upon what's said and the circumstances, but if this board issues a statement that all board members agree to with regard to Dr. Rendell, and that statement is derogatory in nature, then the cause of action would be against the school board as an entity. However, if one board member were to say something derogatory in nature with regard to the superintendent, and the other board members did not agree with or approve the issuance of a statement, then that one individual school board member could be held liable for the statement.
I think we're on a slippery slope here unless it's very, very clear who's being held accountable for what.
Okay.
I'm just going to return to my original statement, Mrs. Zork. Though I appreciate you willing to compromise on this,
Sorry,
I am not.
I can't see
That's okay.
everyone.
Sorry, you move forward, I'll move back.
Though I appreciate you're willing to compromise on this, I am not willing to compromise. I know that you, in particular, speak on the Bob Seuss show every Wednesday morning. We have to understand that it would preclude you from being completely open and honest and transparent. That does not mean that we will intend to hurt Dr. Rendell in any way, to speak bad about him in any way, to ruin his reputation at all. That I don't believe that any one of the board members here would intend to do any of that at any point at time. But just as much as Congress shall make no laws to keep us from having freedom of speech. I don't believe that Dr. Rendell, that this clause here, or that number 5 here, should also, should keep us from our freedom of speech. So I will not compromise. I think that number 5, just as Dr. Schiff mentioned, it is very vague. There is no easy way to compromise on this in any way, shape, or form. It should be removed completely. It's very subjective, and that's very dangerous.
Okay. Mrs. Work?
Yes.
Can I ask our attorney a question? So is this, not this statement per se, but is something similar to this common in a separation agreement?
In my experience, yes. These types of agreements do typically include some sort of a non-disparagement clause. And if I may respond directly to Dr. Schiff as far as needing a very specific what's in, what's out list, I'm afraid that we wouldn't be able to create such a list because I can't tell you what's going to be said tomorrow, and if it's not on the list, then you don't know, kind of thing. So I think it's difficult to come up with a very specific list, but I will offer as a thought language to the, if the board is able to agree to some sort of a non-disparagement clause, to include a provision that if either party believes it's been violated, right? So if something is said and the other party believes it's a violation of the clause, to provide written notice of what was said and perceived to be the violation, and to allow the opportunity for it to be retracted or clarified. I mean, something along those lines, to where there's at least the opportunity to be told, we believe this is in violation of the clause, and whether we're willing to do anything about it.
Would, if we have it written as part of the agreement, if someone was to say something and we got the notice, would we then be held, could we be held liable for a legal action? Or is that just a warning? Are you saying somehow put wording about a warning?
What I'm envisioning, I don't have it drafted, but what I'm envisioning is something to the effect of like a notice to cease and desist. And if we don't cease and desist, then there would be the potential for future legal action, or a notice to clarify the statement so that it wasn't derogatory in nature. I really don't have language drafted up, but I'm just trying to offer up some other ways to think about the clause and how it might be acted upon. Just simply trying to get at the issue that Dr. Schiff mentioned of, I can't give you a hard and fast definition, so I'm trying to offer up a process to where you would at least be put on notice if someone believed that you had been in violation of it.
Can I ask another question? And yes, exactly, that's my point. It's really difficult to come up with a list of every possible thing that somebody could say at some possible time that could be held as disparagement. In this, what I also don't see, and I'm going to have to rely on your expertise, is there a time limitation for that? Is the non-disparagement clause in existence in perpetuity, or is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it how does that generally work when those things are included?
And it's a case by case. I have seen where there is no end time to a non-disparagement clause. I've also seen where there is, within the next 5 years or 6 years, there's some time period put around it if that's the desire of the board.
Can I make a suggestion? Because we are in negotiations on this. Dr. Rendell's listing, so I just would ask that maybe he propose another wording on this and bring it back to us, because I see his letter as my kid's Christmas wish list. It's, you ask for everything, but you have to expect that you're not going to get everything. So I would ask that,
May I I just want to say, just to take this with all seriousness that's necessary. I don't see anything about this being a wish list. I can't imagine anyone wanting their employment to end in this manner. So I just wanted to, I don't think you meant it in that way, to be honest, but I just want to be clear and say that this is obviously not an ideal situation as we move forward through this.
I don't see this as a realistic
Can I,
proposal.
if the conversation we're having is to ask our attorney to begin this negotiation, we had scheduled again next week for us to vote on whether we were authorizing her to do that. Do we need to bring that conversation and, as an action item, and vote on it in this meeting if we're asking her to go ahead with negotiations to bring something else forward next week?
It's my understanding that Mrs. Justice, that was the motion. That's the motion, is that we asked the attorney to enter into negotiations with Dr. Rendell's attorney. And tonight, according to what I'm understanding the motion is that we talk about this now and she can take it back to his attorney. Versus what I had originally thought, that we were just
Saying we accept or we don't.
accept or don't accept, so. Go ahead.
That's why I'm a little confused about what you thought, because the last meeting you specifically said, I'd consider a negotiation, and a negotiation is a back and forth. So this gives us an option. And I think we owe it to all of us to at least have that option. So let's put in, what we want, what is our Christmas list per se, and then let's see what we can come to the middle and agree on. And that at least gives us that option.
And I'm not willing to negotiate. I was just a little confused on what the purpose of the meeting was, and I just felt like I was this came out Friday, so I've not really had the time to properly prepare for this, and I'm trying to, Mrs. Rosario did some really good research and that she's brought today, and so, and then you had mentioned the numbers, Mrs. Barenborg, so I appreciate you bringing those. I just wasn't prepared to have this full conversation tonight. I'm more than willing to negotiate this, because to me, I think we need a peaceful resolution. But whenever we're told we have to know by April 17th, and the superintendent understands that we didn't meet until April 23rd, I don't understand why we were put into the situation to rush and make that decision. And so, but anyways, I am definitely open to talking about this, because I've said all along I want what's best for the district, and I'm not going to rush something just because. So what's the next item that someone wants to talk about? Is it
I'm
talked about 5. Doesn't seem like we have consensus on that. Confusion on the date, because I'm not really seeing why we're rushing to May 24th. And so what about, who wants to talk about number 2, the payout?
May I offer that we address 3 and 4? 3 and 4 seem pretty benign. I'm okay with either one of those.
Okay.
And only because they seem so benign, it might be something easy that, in my opinion.
Well, they're not benign, they're what's to him.
I
So-
mean, it doesn't seem very controversial is what I meant.
Right, and the payout, I agree, 3 and 4, I'm fine with.
Okay.
May I?
Go ahead.
Not only am I fine with 3 and 4, I say thank you. for that student-first type of decision-making that's in this document, saying that no vacation days or other sick days will be used. So I think that was generous in this document, and I think that it's something that should remain, and I say thank you for putting students first, Dr. Rendell.
But it does say, other than the days already approved through May 24th. So how do we know what were already approved?
I have taken one day to go get my son from college that's already been approved.
No, this
That's
here.
the one day.
For coming up?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So back to number 2.
Go ahead.
Okay. That number, I know Mrs. Rosario kind of came up with a different version. That number was the 20-week payout, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's not going to be the number because of the days he works. So it's going to be less. But he's working those days.
He's asking for the 20-week irregardless of how many days.
Actually, no. What he's saying is it's $62,545.60. We got an email today that said, I believe it was today, I don't know, there's so many emails and so many papers. Was it today that we got the email, the follow-up?
The $62,545.60, and it says,
Less,
from that,
less any
take away
days.
his payroll, which he
Right.
would already receive.
But he wouldn't, this is where I think, Ms. Rosario, let me clear that up. He wouldn't receive that payroll, that 20 weeks. If we decide to terminate later, he would get that 20 weeks on top of that date. So you can't really figure that in. What you got to look at,
Say that again?
okay, so he would get the 20 weeks if we terminate without cause, on top of whatever date it is that we decide to terminate.
Right.
Okay? What he's saying, what his attorney is saying today, is that 20 weeks minus those days we agreed to he works. So he wouldn't get the whole 20 weeks without working. That's what I'm saying. He would work some of those days towards that 20-week payout. Is that correct? Is that the way I'm thinking it? Okay.
So it's not the working 20 days plus the 20 weeks, Mrs. Diagresta? Because the way that it's worded in the contract, in the negotiated letter, it says, Dr. Rendell will receive a payout in the amount of $62,554.60 in addition to all terminal pay outlined. So
May I?
Well, I
But
find,
the email follow-up that
I know,
is
that's
what
why
I'm referring to.
I know, that's
Okay.
exactly what I'm asking.
Okay.
I find it unfortunate that we can't even have a conversation about finances because we don't know who to go to. We don't know, we're not getting a straight answer. It seems like there's so many different answers to this. I'm getting very frustrated with
Well,
this.
that's why we were asking
Right.
for her to clarify.
Well, she's
Mrs.
our,
Barenberg makes
she's our
sense, but I don't.
attorney. She's not our finance
I know,
person.
but to understand what the wording, I understand, I know,
Okay,
I
go
know.
ahead.
Mrs. Zork, may I?
Um,
Okay. Oh, sorry.
And then Mrs. Berenberg.
Ms. DeGresta, as I understand it, the letter said the 62,000 and change, which was equivalent to the 20 weeks, as of whatever date was the termination of the contract. Whether that date was May 24th or May 31st or June 28th. Originally. The email clarification that you sent us today, following communication from Dr. Rendell's attorney, said that the start date of the 20 weeks is retroactive till April 10th, the date of the letter. Is that correct? Correct. Therefore, to clarify, in this letter, the agreement is the 20 weeks starts on April 10th. If we do not accept this letter, the 20 weeks starts on whatever is the day that we request termination, unless it's negotiated otherwise.
Right.
Unless there is something in some subsequent letter that says retroactive till April 10th or April 15th or whatever date it is. But the presumption is that the 20 weeks starts from,
Addition.
begins on the date of termination. He works until the date of termination. The 20 weeks starts the day after that. The payout is whatever vacation, FRS, anything is due on top of that 33%. So is there a part of that that's not making sense?
Mrs. Barrenborg just brought it up. I didn't.
I did.
I'm sorry.
I did.
Sorry. Mrs. Zork did. Sorry.
So
sorry.
I-
So,
Not you.
correct, we don't know the exact numbers. We
I-
know that the
That's
20
okay.
weeks cost
Mrs. Zork.
$62,000.
Well, I just calculated 62,545.60, divide that by 20.
21,000.
20
Where
weeks.
you,
Some of
20 weeks is 3,127 times that times 13, because that's the actual, that would be the payout because he's gonna work the 7. So the payout would be with him not working, and
Well, that's,
it was 40,654,
or this number, which is the number that Ms. Rosario came up with.
Right.
The 62,000 minus the amount of time between April 10th and May 24th, 21,278.40, leaving a remaining balance of 41,266.60.
see, I don't have that math. My math's different.
Because you're doing it by weeks.
Mm-hmm.
You're dividing by the 20 weeks. This is actually by payroll.
But his contract's by weeks. It's not by payroll.
But this is what the letter says. The letter says, go back to the letter. This letter here that Mrs. Diagresta, this is where the confusion comes, because the letter from Mrs. Diagresta says, in other words, any payroll, not weeks, any payroll received by Dr. Rendell between April 10th and May 24th, that's the payroll, 21,278.40 between April 10th and May 24th. Any payroll received would be deducted from the 62,554.
I'm gonna have
That's
Mrs.
this.
Diagresta speak to that. Go ahead.
I'm not a numbers person, I'm a
Right.
words person, so I'm going to use words. I'm not going to use numbers. We have an offer, we have an offer of a $62,000 figure. This district pays payroll twice a month, on the 15th and the last day of the month, either the 30th or the 31st, okay? And today is the 16th, correct? So there was payroll yesterday on the 15th. So if you take the $62,000 figure and whatever Dr. Rendell's base salary that he received on April 15th is deducted from the $62,000 figure. Then at the next payroll, which will be April 30th, Dr. Rendell's base salary that he would receive in his payroll on April 30th is deducted from the $62,000 figure. Then we do that again in May for the May 15th payroll. And assuming the letter, we'll just use the facts in the letter for the moment. On May 24th, on May 31, when the next payroll is made, Dr. Rendell's salary would only be until May 24, assuming these are our facts. And that amount, that base
Difference.
salary amount, would be deducted from the $62,000 figure. And then when all of that math is done, there will be something left. And that's the amount that Dr. Rendell would receive in addition to his salary that he's already received, plus his accrued and unused vacation days, his terminal pay, if you will.
That's this number right
But
here.
can we validate that it's this number? Who do we have that can validate that this is actually the way that Mrs. Rosario has it?
Mrs. Zork, I went directly to Kathleen Rich, our payroll manager.
Kathleen, you did. I want to make sure.
I have the emails, I can forward it to you, but I'm just sharing,
Please don't forward it to me.
I mean, through, but I'm just saying, Kathleen Rich actually sent this to all of us, I think, CC'd, so that's the number
She
right
did.
there.
She did. I have it,
Yeah,
right here.
that's,
We all got it.
When do we get it?
At 9:25 this morning.
Okay,
and a few extra, I think, following.
okay, go ahead.
Mrs. Sork, if the school board is interested in this sort of structure for a separation agreement, what I would suggest, and what I have done in the past for those people who are not numbers people like Mrs. Rosario, that are word people, is I actually have the payroll or finance, whatever department is most appropriate, prepare a spreadsheet that shows the calculation that's then attached to the separation agreement, so that we're not, going on an email or who's, may have received information, but that we actually attach it so that it's part of the agreement that is approved by the board. But if you could perhaps have a discussion at some point when you're ready about whether the number is something that we need to discuss further. Don't get yourself hung up on the 20 weeks, because it's not actually a 20-week payout,
It's 13.
approximately, depending upon what that end date is.
If that's
Yes.
if the spirit of this letter continues into whatever is the next letter or negotiation. That was true with an end date of tomorrow. So there's no guarantee that that's true going forward, but it may be, if that's something that we also work with the attorney on.
End date of May 24th. A deadline for a response is tomorrow, according to this letter.
Correct.
Right.
What we haven't voted on and what I haven't heard is whether we're accepting this letter. I'm presuming that we're not, based on the discussion. So given that presumption that we haven't voted, this letter expires tomorrow. The spirit of this letter may not expire tomorrow. That's what we're discussing, and that's what we don't know. If the spirit of this letter continues with a different end date, then yes, we're talking about the time between now and whatever is that separation date is part of the 20 weeks. And yes, we have to know that number, but to be honest, the difference in a number here with this spirit, frankly, to say that the 20 weeks starts from the date of the letter or whatever that is, I frankly think is generous, because it could have started from the date of termination. There was no obligation for it to start as of April 10th. And that's a savings to us. If we're considering a termination without cause, then there's a cost. There's no way around that. When that cost starts determines how much we're paying. For that cost to have started retroactively is in our best interest. However, whether that will continue moving forward, we don't know. We can request that moving forward. We can request that be part of the negotiation. But if that's true, and if we're talking numbers basically in the area as per that email of 62,000 minus 21,000, plus the 33%, et cetera, which has to go on top of the 41,000, the difference between a day here and a day there, we're talking about a couple of $1,000s. That is less consequential than the date we're looking at and the spirit of the agreement moving forward. So if it's a question of is it $1,000 here or $1,000 there, yes, it matters. It's $1,000. That's not inconsequential, and I'm cognizant of that. And yes, we need exact numbers. But right now, what we need more, I think, is our intent going forward, that we're not accepting this letter. If we're voting on on authorizing our attorney to move forward in negotiations, then we vote on that. We've given some structure and some agreement, and we need to get clear numbers.
Okay.
That's kind of where we are. As I see it, that's where we are, unless I'm missing something.
Okay. No, I agree.
Yes, I move this evening that we ask our school board attorney to come up with a document, to work with the superintendent's attorney, to come up with a document, a mutual separation agreement that we can approve as soon as possible. We've discussed a number of the different terms of the letter that we received from the superintendent's attorney this evening. I'd like to move forward if we could. I'd like for us to be respectful and responsible in how we handle this, recognizing the fact that we do have obligations to the contract with the superintendent, and recognizing the fact that any person considering working for the school district of Indian River County and with this school board will expect that we will also hold the contract that we enter into with them to be true. I agree with Dr. Schiff about the fact that I do feel it's generous that the salary is subtracted from the payout. And I agree with Dr. Schiff that it would be very nice if the spirit, I believe that's what she means the spirit of this letter continues. But as we continue in discussion coming into hour 3, I do not know if that will be the case. I ask that this school board vote on moving into negotiations for our attorney, to move into negotiations with the superintendent's attorney for a mutual separation agreement that we can all agree on so that we can come together, heal as a district, and move forward in a new superintendent search.
Mrs. Berenberg and Mrs. Rosario.
Sorry, am I?
No, you're good.
You want to move forward?
No,
I'll move back.
you're good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to at least have that option and move forward and have that negotiated. I do have one other question that wasn't on the letter, but I do have that question. Normally, when a person separates from the district, their insurance is paid 1 month ahead. And so when the insurance is paid, they have that insurance for 30 days. And then after that, they either go to COBRA or they go to wherever they're going to be employed next. And here, that was the question I had before when you were talking about insurance. Remember, and I had to hold my question? Okay, I'm going back to that question. So basically in the email that we got today that Ms. Rosario had asked for information from Ms. Rich, the monthly board contribution for health insurance is $540 and $6.52. So I'm asking, would that just be the final payment then, would end at the last date of his employment then, and that would get him through the 30 days after his employment? Is that how it would work? I guess I'm asking that to Ms. DeGresta.
I can't answer that question,
Okay.
sorry.
That's a finance.
That's a finance question, I know. And that's why I asked, I'm going to say it publicly, I asked several ways to get a finance person here tonight. And so I'm a little frustrated with that. I asked, I can't ask you, but I asked the secretary and the superintendent and the attorney, and I finally got something back from the attorney that said that she can't ask direct staff to come. Then the secretary said, I have sent that to you. And then I specifically asked the superintendent. The reason why I didn't ask the superintendent specifically before that is because we were talking about separating from him. And I was very nervous about asking him directly for something without going through my attorney. So that's why I did what I did. However, it is frustrating not having a finance person here. But I think that we can give her at least the direction to go in. We're not saying we agree to whatever we're saying right now. I think that we need to let our attorney do that work and then come back to us with an option for next week.
Mrs., are you finished? Mrs. Berenberg? Mrs. Rosario?
We are talking about these points. We are talking about them so that our attorney can negotiate them. So the constant talk that we're not doing that's what we should be doing, we are doing that. And we're going into hour 2, not hour 3, because we started at 6. And so if we have to discuss for as long as we can discuss, then we need to discuss. But that's what our job is. It's to discuss, agree, and move forward. So we're still on item 2, I believe.
Can I say something? I'm
Sure,
well, no, I didn't want to interrupt Mrs. Rosario, but we have to, if we're going to work together as a board, and if we're going to get through this together, we have to stop making comments that's condescending to other board members. we need to look at what's ahead of us. And, you know, this isn't time to grandstand and make these wonderful, elaborate statements just so that you can perceive to be more, informed or looking like you're looking out for the best interest of the district. We're all doing that. And if we're going to work together as a board, we have to respect one another. And if they need 3 hours to discuss this, if they need 5 hours to discuss this, that's what we have to do. I didn't call this meeting. I don't even know who
I don't know.
initially called the meeting.
I don't know.
But we're here tonight, and let's hash it out. That's why we're here. So please don't rush us through this process. I would appreciate that. You know, I'm concerned that our assistant superintendents aren't here, and I know they're probably not here because they were probably asked not to be here. I feel like if we are looking at tapping an assistant superintendent, they need to be here. I'm sure they're going to be watching it at home, and I'm not in any way saying that negative for them not to be here, but just like our finance person should have been here tonight. You know, we are trying to do this blindly, and it's unfortunate because it makes us look like the Stooges up here because we don't know what's going on, but it's not, it's not because we're not trying to find the answer. So if we need to be here until midnight and discuss this, we're here. So I would appreciate if we weren't rushed on this.
May I don't even know if we're still on number 2. I think that we've agreed to 3 and 4. I think we agreed to remove 5 because I don't think that there was consensus on 5. And I know I'm going to probably throw another loop in here. Something that's not here that I would like to negotiate is the spending authority until the end date. And I don't know when and where that, how do we discuss that?
That is not that is, and correct me, Mrs. DeAgresta, that is not related to the employment negotiations. That would be a talked about discussion with the board to move forward that way, but that would not be in here. Is that correct, Mrs. DeAgresta?
Mrs. Zork, the delegated authority to the superintendent and the purchasing department with regard to purchasing authority is in a board policy, not in the superintendent's employment agreement. So if the board wishes to revise that policy, you certainly can implement rulemaking and do so.
Okay. So you do bring up a good point. Is there any items that you would like to see that are not mentioned in here? Because if we are directing our board attorney to go back and negotiate this, is there any item that isn't in here that you would like to see in here? And obviously that would have to come through board consensus, but any thoughts on that? Mrs. Berenborg?
I just want to bring up 2 points. One, I just want clarification about insurance.
Okay.
And then 2, we didn't agree to take 5 off the table. We agreed to have our attorney come up with different language to offer, and perhaps his attorney would come back with different language as well. So as I recall, that's what we discussed, not taking it totally off the table.
I am open.
Yeah, because I think that's typical in a separation, that, one party does not want to be, publicly humiliated by another party in any separation. And so I think if we act as professionals, we don't have to worry about it. I have nothing else that I can think of at this moment to put on there, other than going back to the 62,000. I'm with Dr. Schiff on that. I think it was fair. And the fact that it's less than if you go back to the termination without cause, or the termination with costs. It's going to be less because of the fact that he's working those days. Yeah, without cost, thank you. And so that was kind of oh, wow. When I got that email today, I thought, oh, well, that's kind of a nice little peace offering that was emailed to us today. Because when I saw this, I thought, okay, well, that's exactly the termination, the other contract we had. But when we get the email that the public wasn't probably aware of, that kind of threw a different number at us. And that number is quite a bit lower than the other number we would have been paying. So that's why I wanted to make that statement that I'm interested in negotiating this, and at least we have that option next week.
Okay, thank you. Mrs.,
for number 2, I would just ask Mrs. DeAgresta to change the wording or, request to have the wording, I'm sorry, not there. Yes, in number 2, to request that the wording be changed to reflect the email that you sent to us today,
yes.
so that we're clear that it's not 62 or whatever it is, the number that we throw out in addition to, that it's exactly as you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Schiff?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yes,
ahead.
thank you, Mrs. Zork. I believe that our school board attorney, acting in our best interest, may add a few things, like a general release of all claims to this document. So I would imagine that she will probably do some things to protect our interests going forward. I have nothing else that I would personally like to add at this time.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. Zorn?
Yes.
Going back to the date,
Uh-huh.
because we threw a bunch of different dates around. I think we do need to kind of come up with an idea of what date, and I'm comfortable with May 31st.
I am also comfortable with May 31st.
I am not, so.
Okay.
What about, because I just don't have enough information at this point.
I think I'm comfortable with May 31st. I think that June 28th is too far, too long, or however way you want it. But I would be fine with May 31st as well, so long as we don't have a lot of, 2 or 3 weeks in between our next discussion sessions. Otherwise, I would go with the June 28th.
Can I make a suggestion? I'm with you, Mrs. Zork, on, while I think we have to come up with a date, I'm reluctant to be specific until we understand exactly what's ahead of us. And I think what I hear you alluding to is until we've talked to, if it's FSBA, or somebody who, when Dr. Pritchett was here, that was in completely different circumstances, because that was, as I understand it, that was a superintendent who was retiring, who would, no?
No, it was a superintendent that was terminated.
Sorry, that was longer ago, sorry, I was thinking it was at the Fran Adams juncture, but it
Right,
wasn't, never
she-
mind. You're right, sorry, my mistake. But that said, I personally, like you, I have not been through this process, and I don't know how cumbersome it is, I don't know what kind of meeting time it requires, I know how difficult it is to get us together as a board. I have no idea what FSBA or any other organization would recommend to us going forward, and I would want to have that information. So I'm open to the idea of May 31st, pending that we better understand the process and what FSBA might recommend to us. But that we consider a couple of different dates pending that conversation. Is that what you were speaking to? Is
It
that?
is.
Okay.
Until we really understand the timeline for the interim, I don't know why we're being rushed if the whole purpose of this is to work together. We're working with him. I just ask that he works with us a little bit on understanding this. So I have a couple of items that I would like to see on this that is not here. And I talked to Mrs. DeAgresta about this yesterday. And she explained to me what it was actually the legal terminology, because I told her my idea is, I do not, if we sign this agreement, I want a clear cut. I don't want Dr. Rendell coming back and not that he would, but we have to just protect ourselves. That we have some type of agreement that a complete release of all claims between the parties, so he can't come back and sue us, and we can't go after him if we get into something and we for whatever reason felt like that we wanted to hold him accountable. There is a name for that, and it's called a general release. So I would like to, Mrs. D'Agresta, can you explain what that is?
Of course. It's fairly standard in separation agreements, employment separation agreements, once the parties have worked out the monetary and the timelines and that sort of thing, to include a mutual general release. So essentially we're saying from the beginning of time until the date of the agreement, whatever issues the parties may have had are done. And we agree to release each other with regard to any causes of action or other claims that might, be there, whether known or unknown, but we're done from the beginning of time up until the date of the agreement. It's pretty standard language to include a mutual release in a document such as this.
So that is something that I would like to see in addition. One other thought I had was, I feel like we're trying to work on a timeline for us, and then we're trying to work on a timeline with Dr. Rendell. I would like to see some type of language in this saying that if, let's say we do go with May 31st. So the time that from before to May 31st, if he has accepted a position anywhere and has committed to coming to work at a different position, anytime prior to May 31st, whenever that date is, that it voids the payout going forward. So I would like to see something like that in there. And the whole purpose of this is we're trying to work with the superintendent. We've heard from various people that he does have a family, but we also have to look at the best interest for our family, which is the school district, our children, and our employees. And I think that would help safeguard some way us for a financial payout if he's already accepted a position where he won't be financially hindered, if that's the case. So that was my two suggestions that I would like to see in the contract. Any thoughts on that? Has to be consensus. It can't
Yes.
just be me.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea. It's smart for us to include that in there. You have my, okay, my good.
Mrs. Berenberg?
That kind of brings us back to, in his contract, where if he decides to leave, that's in there. It basically is exactly what, so if he got another position, he would give us 30 days' notice, and then there would be no payout.
Well, we wouldn't have 30 days. In this case,
No, I know that. Well, I'm going back to the
Right.
contract, Ms.
Right.
Rosario. So what I'm trying to say is that that's already kind of stated in there if he gets other employment. What you're asking for.
No, what I'm asking for is if he has already or does accept a position anytime between those 7 weeks to the last day of the 7 weeks, we would owe him 13
Oh, I see what you're
weeks.
saying. Okay.
But if he accepts a position, say May 30th, then I don't think that we should have to obligate ourselves to pay the 13 weeks. So I want that type of because the whole purpose is, it's, you know, the term of double dipping. I want to avoid that, you know, because I have to look out for the best interests of this entire district, not just one person.
I think we all are.
Okay.
In an effort, you know, I've made mention a couple of times about potential candidates watching this meeting, and seeing how we make decisions as a school board. We do have a contract with the superintendent, and I think it's important we operate in good faith in that contract. I think that this has been horribly uncomfortable and difficult to work through. And I think that it is in the best interest of the school district, our parents, our families, our community members, and the superintendent to part ways as respectfully and responsibly as possible. That being said, I don't know that I would support that type of a clause in the document, as I fear that perhaps a potential candidate may be watching this meeting and may feel that we will not operate in good faith in any type of a contract going forward. It's concerning to me. And I do want us to be able to find a high quality, attract a high quality candidate to serve as our next superintendent, who will know that they will be treated fairly and with respect.
Any comments?
No.
No? Okay. So I would like to see that in there for protection of our district, so. And I think if we find, if there's any candidate out there watching this business meeting, they would think that was a smart move, so. All right. Anything else? We will have this discussion. We'll add this for tomorrow as an amendment to the agenda for us to continue talking about this, because if Mrs. DeAgresta has reached out and we hear anything, we will need to talk about it.
Mrs. Sork, you have a motion and a second on the floor, so we'll need to take affirmative action or not to move forward.
I don't know if we're finished with our discussion, so thank you for reminding me.
I just noticed on the bottom, the last paragraph, this offer shall remain open until April 17th. In the negotiations, I would ask Mrs. DeAgresta that both parties would be considerate of the dates of which that, you know, we already meet. So, I mean, I'm okay with calling another special meeting if we have to, but I just think that that should be something to be sensitive to for everybody, you know, Mrs. Esplin in particular. And the last, number 6, none of us have discussed number 6. I think that, like 3 and 4, seem okay. But except for the end date, obviously, that would. Number 6 says the remaining provisions of his employment agreement as amended will remain unchanged through, you know, whatever the end date would be.
Mrs. DeAgresta, it seems very germane, but is there anything that we need to be aware of with that comment, or with that want in this letter?
Are you talking about paragraph number 6? No, I would
Okay.
expect that the employment agreement would remain in force.
Okay.
Good.
Okay,
So I don't have any legal concerns about it.
okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm not missing something in there. Thank you. Any other comments to number 6? No? Okay. So, so the motion on the floor is to ask Mrs. DeAgresta to entertain into negotiations with Dr. Rendell's attorney, I guess based on the recommendations that we had here tonight. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So we have a motion from Mrs. Justice, a second with Mrs. Barrenborg. So are we ready to vote? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. 5-0. Okay. So, let me find my agenda. Just 1 second, here it is. I have it. All right. I know we do have school board matters, but, I would ask that out of respect of time that we keep this to a very minimum if there is any board member that wishes to speak under school board matters.
Sure, I'd like
Or actually, I'm sorry, let me go back up here, I don't have my regular agenda. At this time, we just concluded the action agenda. Superintendent's report. Dr. Rendell,
I have nothing to report.
thank you. Board discussion.
I have something to say about calling a special meeting.
Under board discussion or
Wherever
under
you
school
put
board
me.
member matters?
Wherever you put me.
Okay,
I have a board member matter that I'd like to
okay,
address.
okay.
No discussion for me this evening.
Okay. So, no discussion, board member matter, you can make your comment there. So, I would like to start with board member matters, Mrs. Justice.
Thank you. I just want to say I had the opportunity to start my day with our students today. I went to Wabasso School. They had a Special Olympics event, and it was absolutely lovely. I want to thank our community partner, the Special Olympics, for helping to organize that event, as well as the staff at the Wabasso School. It was a wonderful event to see our students working together and celebrating each other, and I'm just very thankful that we were invited to attend.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Schiff?
No, ma'am.
No? Mrs. Rosario?
I also went to the Wabasso School today for their Special Olympics. My calendar actually had the event up until noon. I got there at 11, and they had just finished. So apparently what was on my calendar was off, but I had a wonderful tour nonetheless, went into all the classrooms. Absolutely lovely. Sweet, sweet, sweet. I engaged with the students and learned about their program, had a great conversation with the principal and their behavior analyst. So Wabasso School is a wonderful learning environment for their children. Should I just go into my other?
So if you want to make your comment,
Take it now.
it's for comment but not discussion.
So the comment that I have is, you probably should have put me in discussion, but I don't know who called this special meeting today, and I don't know why it has to be a secret. We are supposed to be a transparent board. We are supposed to operate in complete and full transparency. When I asked Mrs. Esplin, when Mrs. Esplin called me last week and Mrs. Esplin asked if I was available to meet, I said yes, I was available. I asked her who's calling the meeting, and she said, I am not allowed to say. I find that that is incredibly inappropriate. I find it is, it puts Mrs. Esplin in an absolutely uncomfortable and unprofessional situation where she reports to every single board member, not just one. I think that she deserves much more respect than that, where I should not have to question her and ask her, what do you mean you can't tell me? And she said the board member who called it is not the chair, but I was told not to say. I don't understand that. I can't understand it. And so when I looked at the agenda, I saw 3 names. I saw Mrs. Barrenbrook, myself, Mrs. Justice's name. And my first concern was, we don't have a full board. I called Mrs. Esplin back and said, if we only have 3 people, please remove my name from the RSVP list, because it's that important that everyone be present. And if at any point it becomes only 3 people, we need to, I will not be present because I want everybody there. I just hope that moving forward, first, I would like to know who called the meeting. I do not want to continue operating in pretense. And I want to ask, moving forward, although I do know that any board member can call a special meeting. No, only board, not any board member can call a special meeting?
No, ma'am.
Well, in this particular case, any board member called it. The chair didn't.
According to both Florida statute and your board policy, a special meeting of the school board can be called by the chairman, or it can be called by a majority of the other members of the school board. And so this particular meeting, I was under the impression had been called by 3 members of the school board, that 3 members agreed to hold the meeting.
I didn't ask for it to be called. I was asked if I would attend.
I
So
don't
again,
know.
false pretense. So I'd like to know who called this meeting.
Mrs. DeAgresta, I feel like we're getting in discussion, so.
Well, this is important. Someone called the meeting and is keeping it secret. And then the understanding is that 3 board members called it, which I did not. I was asked if I would be available. I did not call the meeting. And it is important.
To move this into a discussion, Mrs. DeAgresta, how would I go about that with Robert's rules to get consensus to?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. Are you asking to move it into?
I mean, if we're in board member matters where everyone makes a comment or, has an item, but it's, board member matters is not discussion. So if she's asking a question, that makes it a discussion.
Yes,
So-
it gives it the appearance of a discussion.
Okay,
matter. Yes, if
so
the board
under
wishes
board
to
member
go
matters,
back,
can we,
I would suggest that you go back to the prior section of
Okay.
the agenda and handle whatever you'd like to.
okay, so okay. So let's go back to discussion. This is not a board member matter, and Mrs. Rosario has a valid concern now that if it takes 3 to call a special meeting, if the chair doesn't call it, then it does not sound like that was followed, what I'm hearing. So, Mrs. Barrenborg, did you call for the special meeting?
No, but the way that the question was asked of me was, would I be okay because of the date of the letter? Would I be okay with meeting tonight? And would I be a majority and wanting to meet? And yes, I wanted to meet. I wanted to discuss this because I felt like the date was looming over our head. But did I call for the meeting? No. But am I happy that we have this discussion and we're talking about this? Yes, especially in light of the email that we got today. So I was okay with it. But I also, I didn't know about policies or whatever. But the way it was brought to me was, would you be willing to meet and would you want to meet? And the question to me was, yes, I wanted to meet. I was kind of surprised you didn't call the meeting. When we all got a letter with a date on it that was before our next meeting, I was surprised that our board chair did not call a meeting.
The reason I did not call the meeting is because we had specifically said that we were going to direct Mrs. DeAgresta on April 23rd to begin negotiations. And in addition, on April 23rd, I felt like we needed to have the vote, are we going to extend his contract or not extend his contract, before we even had the conversation about negotiating. And in addition, to have a rushed meeting with something as important like this, to me, I think that's poor government, because it's not transparent. We did not give our community enough time. The notice just went into the paper today. It did not give our community the transparency that something as, you know, costly and just
Mrs. Ork?
monumental as this, it was called Friday, and here we are Tuesday. That, to me, is bad business.
But Mrs. Ork, had you called it when you received the letter, then we would have had plenty of time to be able to have this discussion. That's why I was kind of surprised that it hadn't been called. I actually expected that we were going to meet. I figured, okay, well, we got this letter, we got this date. I get what you're saying, you wanted the ball to be in our court. I get that. But in a negotiation, the ball goes back and forth across the net. And so if, you know, his attorney leapt to this, you know, and yet we put it out there on TV saying that we're willing to negotiate, I felt like we at least needed to respond somehow. I would have felt like, how come we're not responding to this at all? Even if we decided not to respond, but I think we can only speak in the sunshine, so I'd rather we talk about it
Right.
before August or April 17th. Hold on a second, I'm not done. Instead of letting this date just fly by, I was kind of like oh, I want to talk to my other board members. And that's why I was okay with meeting. I had no problem with meeting today. I cleared my schedule, no problem.
Okay, I disagree with the letter, so I didn't feel the urgency to come and talk about this. It was something that I was gonna put on the April 23rd, was post the letter. I had talked to Mrs. Diagresta, and immediately she sent an email to the superintendent's attorney and asked, help me with the wording, but we sent the email to help the attorney understand that we don't meet again until the 23rd, to try to get the understanding if we could get this moved to at least the 23rd, and we never heard back from the attorney, correct?
I did not ask for anything from the attorney.
Okay.
I advised the Dr. Rendell's lawyer that the board did not have another meeting until the 23rd. I did not want the lawyer to think that we were simply ignoring the date, but I wanted to let him know that the meetings, what the existing meeting schedule was, and I had no idea if there would be the ability to have a meeting prior to the 17th. So I just let them know we're not ignoring you, but we don't meet until the 23rd.
Mrs. Ork?
Go ahead.
I have a concern that because you didn't like what the letter said, that you didn't want to have a discussion with us, that you went ahead and just directed her to do something on your own. I have a concern about that, because we are a board of 5. I want to be a cohesive board. You've talked about that over and over again. I feel like I'm really trying hard to be that neutral, think it through person. And I want to be able to trust that you're going to want our opinion. And I would hope in the future that when we get something like this, that you would want to call a meeting and say, let's discuss it, versus you just making that decision and then we all kind of going, what happened? Because I did feel like I was a little bit out of the loop on it.
Well, I think we all got the same email. We all understand the same rule that 3 can call for the meeting. It just doesn't take, it's not only the chair. So you've called the meeting with Mrs. Justice, I'm assuming, and,
I didn't call the meeting.
okay,
I was asked whether or not
Okay.
I would like to attend and discuss this, and would I be willing to be, that I was asked, there needs to be 3 people to have a meeting that agree to have the meeting. And I said, sure, I want to talk. So, you know,
well,
we're getting into picky and stuff, and this is not healthy for us.
right,
So I want to get off of this and just say, you know what, let's move on, let's learn from this, and let's move on, and let's say, in the future, if there's something like this where there's a date, I'm asking whoever the chair is to please be cognizant of the fact that your fellow board members may not agree with the same thing you agree with and would like to at least discuss it. Like I told you, I didn't agree to everything in that letter. I had some serious concerns with the letter, but I was willing to discuss it with all of you. I wasn't willing to just let it go. And that's why I wanted to meet. I absolutely did.
And we're here because you wanted to meet, so we're here. So like you said, nothing, I didn't call the meeting, but 3 did, so we're here.
I did not call the meeting.
Which, that is a
Who called the
problem.
meeting then?
Mrs. Justice had to have called the meeting.
Why isn't she?
I don't know why she's so secretive about it. It doesn't matter who called it.
Mrs. Zork, if I may.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. I actually did state earlier this evening that I did feel that we had a duty to discuss the letter. I agree with Mrs. Barenborg in the comments that she has made this evening. Florida State statute and board policy is written expressly to be able to protect school boards or other boards from, or other groups from this type of action from a board chair not calling a meeting. There is a provision that allows for 3 board members to come together to ask to have a meeting. I was in conversation with Mrs. D'Agresta on Friday. I did wait for our school board chair to answer until the very last moment that the meeting could be noticed with a 48-hour window, and it was. I was told that was Friday. I did wait until Friday for the meeting to be called, and when it wasn't called, I did ask with Mrs. D'Agresta's guidance, and I know that she spoke with our board secretary, Ms. Esplin, on what the right way going forward was for 3 board members to agree to have a special meeting. I was the person that called, so Mrs. Esplin did not call me to ask me if I was willing to attend. I had said I am willing to attend to discuss the letter. And so it was my understanding that she would then call other board members, and perhaps Ms. D'Agresta can say I did not ask for it not to be said that I somehow was the one interested in holding the meeting, but I believe because of sunshine, she may not be able to share that. Ms. D'Agresta, perhaps you could make mention of that. But there was the ability to say for the single purpose of discussion being the letter, and that was what I shared. Dr. Schiff has not spoken this evening, and I have a concern that perhaps our board secretary is somehow being unfairly taken as not having been honest and straightforward with how the meeting, how we were going about calling this meeting. So Dr. Schiff, I don't know if you'd like to make comment about how this was approached with you.
Sure,
Thank
happy to
you.
do that.
Thank you.
I received a call from Mrs. Esplin, who said, "Are you available and would you be willing to meet on Tuesday, the 16th?" I said, "That time is really bad for me. However, if it is essential, I'll see what I can work out." I said, "As of this moment, I'm not committing. I'm going to call Ms. D'Agresta." So the first thing I did was I called Ms. D'Agresta to understand how the process worked. She told me that if the chair was not calling the meeting, it required 3 board members to hold a special meeting. I then called Mrs. Esplin back to say, "This is my understanding. Are there 3 board members calling this meeting?" Ms. Esplin was in other meetings. I left a message. By the time she called me back, she told me that 3 other board members had agreed to set the meeting. That was the end of the conversation. Well, actually, we chatted some more, but that was for purposes of the business of this meeting. That's what happened. I didn't call the meeting. I agree with Mrs. Zork that that irrespective of my personal feelings about the letter, this is not about my personal feelings, this is about my belief that operating in constant crisis and jumping every time we're asked to jump is not the best way to do business. I wanted to slow down a bit, to be honest. And so I was not someone who called the meeting. I had concerns about how the meeting was called. I did not, as a new board member, until I spoke to Ms. D'Agresta, I did not know precisely that the rule was because we have not yet had this arise. So far, all of our business meetings have been called by Mrs. Zork and the superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time we've had a special meeting. I didn't understand the process. I now understand the process. I am equally distressed as some of my colleagues at the obfuscation, at the lack of clarity about the process. And I am concerned that the ways in which we continue, if we continue to operate in crisis, we're not going to do a very good job of getting the business of the board and of the district done. I don't want to keep operating in crisis. We are in a really tough moment right now, and I get that. But I also believe that when you're in tough moments, you take a minute, you breathe, and you figure out how to move forward rather than jumping every time somebody says jump. So that's where I was.
So, and I would just like to say, I completely agree with you. And I think that the purpose of the discussion this evening could have very well been, we're not ready to talk about this, and we have a meeting on the 23rd, and the meeting could have been over. But I did feel that it was important to meet, to make that decision as a board. Having any board member or the chair decide that it's not something that they would like to move forward with unilaterally, rather than having a discussion as a board, is concerning to me. And while I recognize in this moment that you may not disagree with that, there may be something that happens in the future that you might disagree with, and you might feel disenfranchised in that moment when your considerations or your ability to have discussion, as Mrs. Barrenbrook has shared tonight, may be hindered by that type of unilateral action. In which
Can I
case-
say something since she's speaking directly about me? No,
Well,
I.
she's speaking to me. Can I
Well,
just respond to
go
that for a
ahead.
second? What I'm learning from this conversation is that there's some real lack of clarity in how these conversations go forward. What I would like to do, and put either, whether this is a board policy or this goes on a discussion, I would like in the future to get some clarity about the legally and as per statute and policy, how this has to happen. Because whether or not it's an issue of importance to me, I have the privilege and the right and the responsibility, if there is an issue, to, with 3 other board members, call a meeting. That's how it works. And I have no reason, if it's something that's important to me, to not have my name put out as the person who wants to call that meeting. I don't know if there's a legal prohibition against doing that. If there is, I understand it. If there's not, let's change that.
To be clear, I did not ask to not have my
I'm
name
not saying you
shared.
did, but
I would just like to be clear, I did not ask for my name to not be shared as to having an interest in having the meeting held. I just want to be clear about that. I've said before, I will state again, I believed it was our duty as a school board to meet to discuss this.
And I'm not suggesting you did. I'm suggesting that if there is a policy or if there is a legal prohibition on that, then I want to know that for going forward.
Fair enough.
Mrs. Rosario.
This is not about pointing fingers right now, but the fact is that in my conversation with Mrs. Esplin, I asked her directly, and she directly said, the board who called the meeting has asked that she not share who it was. She was told directly, do not share her name. I asked, why? We're going to find out who it was anyway in the board meeting. So the fact that you are saying that, Mrs. Justice, right now, and quite honestly, it's shocking. I find that it goes against the very protocol that you're asking all of us to sign. If you call the meeting, let your name be known.
Mrs. Rosario, I have stated, and I will state again, that I did not,
Mrs. Esplin
I did
said.
not ask for my name not to be attached to this in any way. I asked for us to operate following state statute and board policy going forward. And I'm sorry, thank you, Mrs. Zork. And I would like to state that I do not appreciate you calling me a liar
I didn't
on the
call you a
dais.
liar.
I do not appreciate this. Again, future leaders of this school district may be watching this meeting, and I feel that we have an obligation to behave as professionally and as respectfully as possible. We are now back into discussion. I'd like to move back into board member matters so that we can behave professionally and respectfully. Thank you.
With all due respect, Mrs. Justice, it's what I find troubling is that you can be condescending and put down other board members, but when other board members try to speak up for themselves, then we are being negative and then you try to make us feel bad for speaking up for ourselves. So that, but but I do want to say this, that in the spirit of transparency, we said that we were going to have on our agenda on April 23rd, we were going to have the vote to extend or not extend the superintendent's contract. We had that discussion. The board agreed to that. The board also agreed that at that meeting that we were going to also direct the attorney to negotiate with our superintendent a resolution and as a resignation. I did talk with our attorney, and I got legal counsel from our attorney, and she did reach out to the superintendent's attorney, and so I heard from the board that you wanted to talk about it on the 23rd. And I know that the entire board has the ability to call these meetings. I do think with, I didn't call this meeting, I did not call this meeting, Mrs. Berenberg. I just want to make that clarification with you because I disagree with the letter. I didn't call the meeting because we're always put into these crisis situations. So that was the reason I did not want to call this meeting, is that this is not a crisis. You know, we had not yet voted if we're going to extend his contract or not extend his contract. So to me, his letter was not a crisis, that we should have just went about our business and then discussed it as we all had planned on the 23rd. That was, go ahead.
Mrs. Ork, I believe Dr. Schiff brought up it was the crisis comment. You mentioned, excuse me, you mentioned in the discussion that you were very willing to negotiate.
And I am.
When I saw the letter the next day, that is what I'm referring to. I'm not acting on a crisis. I'm not acting on a, oh, we got a letter from attorney. What I'm acting on is you put it out there that we're willing to negotiate. His attorney put it out there, he's willing to negotiate. Let's talk. And that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's why I was thinking you were going to call a meeting.
Right.
I'm not blaming you for not calling a meeting. I don't get into that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I wished you had called the meeting because.
Well, we have someone that is now saying that, which.
Okay, let's just bury that. But what I'm saying is, let's move forward, let's be
Right.
professional. It is what it is, let's move on. But I also feel like tonight, even though it was long, and we're almost into our 4th hour, I think that at least this was a productive opportunity for us to have a discussion about how to react to that letter. Where, had we not had this meeting, we would be sitting there on the 23rd with all these other things that we had to discuss. And obviously, this took us a long time. So that meeting might have gone till 1 in the morning. And that's why I'm glad that we actually had this meeting, because we do have long discussions and we do hash it out. And I'm okay with that. But I also felt like at least we've got this little tiny bitty step that we're moving towards possible resolution, maybe not. But at least we have this option that's on the table that we can move forward with. So I would like to move forward, and if you can, I have 1 member's matter, so.
It was my discussion. May I close out my discussion?
Yes.
Thank you for, Madam Chair, for going back into discussion for this item. I would ask, as a resolution to this, that in the future, if any board member would like to call a special meeting, that we would make it very clear through Mrs. Esplin that there.
Oh, the attorney.
No, when she calls us to say there is a need for consensus, that we understand that we do, whomever does it.
But it's polling. If we're calling to say, do you want to have a meeting?
Wouldn't she still have to call to get consensus?
No, I see, if you call a meeting, you call Mrs. Esplin and say, I would like to have a meeting, or you call Mrs. DeAgresta and say, I would like to have a meeting. You don't have one board member who says, I want to have a meeting, so you have other people call and say, are you available? To me, that's not calling a meeting. Or that's not 3 people calling a meeting.
No.
Is
What
that,
happened now? I'm talking about what happened now. That
But
we
I
are
want-
made aware that we are not. Those who are agreeing, who are saying, I am available, as in this case, that it is made clear, you are saying you are available to be the part of the consensus who would be calling the meeting. That needs to be made clear. And I also would ask that we know who is calling, that you share who you are, and that we never put Mrs. Esplin in that position again.
I would like clarity from Mrs. DeAgresta on term or definition of calling a meeting.
Okay. What the law provides is the chairman of the school board has the authority to call a meeting. The law also provides that a majority of the board, which for this board is 3 members, has the authority to call a meeting. So if a board member would like to have a meeting scheduled, and it's not the chairman, it's the others, non-chairman people, the only way to know, because board members can't call each other,
Right.
is for your board clerk, the person who does your work for you, to contact to see if there are 3 board members who want to call a meeting.
Can I ask, and then, so as chair, I could have said, I would like to call a meeting, but at first I would like to see if there's 3 other board members that would like to call the meeting before I call the meeting. Instead of it just being me who wants to call the meeting. Because,
The law allows the chairman to call a meeting. So if the chairman wishes to call a meeting, you can call a meeting. The only issue would be, we need to have a quorum to actually have a meeting. So there has to be other people, at least 2 other people other than the chairman, who will be physically in the room in order to have a meeting.
When I was called, I was asked if I was available, not if I wanted to call a meeting.
Right.
Is there anything that prohibits us from changing the language that Mrs. Esplin is requested to use that says, would you be interested in calling a meeting to discuss whatever it is, in this case, the letter, whatever it is the board member who has requested the meeting is asking for. And then I get a call that says, are you interested in calling a meeting? I then say yes or no, I'm interested or I'm not. That's a very different question than, am I available to meet? And so I can understand where, because Mrs. Esplin has perhaps not been through this process either. I don't know if you have or not, but I'm gonna leap ahead and suggest that maybe she hasn't and hasn't been given clear direction on how to have these conversations, that we do that. And is there any legal prohibition against directing or requesting that when Mrs. Esplin gets a call from a board member requesting a meeting, that she, when she calls other board members, so that it's not polling and it's not a misleading question, says, a board member has requested to call a meeting about X. Are you also interested in calling a meeting about X? And then I know what I'm being asked for, because what I was asked for was something different this time. Is there anything that prevents us from doing that?
No, ma'am. The board can establish internal workings for your office.
So in the future, I would like, if, I don't know if we do this by consensus, or if she gets directed by Mrs. Zork, but I would like to request then that I get a call that says, are you interested in calling a meeting, not are you available to attend? Number 2, is there anything legally in board policy or in statute that legally prohibits Mrs. Esplin from saying, Ms. Dr. Schiff has requested a meeting on X. Are you also interested in calling the meeting on X? Is there anything that prohibits her from identifying me by name?
No, ma'am. The only time there would be a prohibition under the Sunshine Law is if this communication was used as a way, as a conduit essentially, for Mrs. Esplin to share information between board members that should have been shared in a public meeting. That's when we get into an issue with a Sunshine Law violation. But for scheduling purposes, there's no prohibition of sharing that name.
By doing it this way, do we risk that Mrs. Esplin could potentially get in trouble by inadvertently acting as a conduit?
Only if Mrs. Esplin acts as a conduit will you get into trouble.
So if Mrs. Esplin says to Mrs. Rosario, Dr. Schiff has requested a meeting on April 16th to discuss the letter. Are you also interested in calling a meeting? That's fine.
That would be fine. And as long as there were a total of 3 board members that were interested in calling the meeting can be scheduled. If only 2 board members were interested in calling the meeting does not fit the definition under the statute, and the meeting cannot be scheduled.
Okay.
It would be up to the chairman.
So I will, as chair, take advantage of that, and I will ask if we have 3 board members that would like to call for the meeting. Right? Because if one board member can, because if I don't want to call a meeting, I need to know if my other board members want to call a meeting. That's what I'm hearing.
No, I did not say that. But if you want to establish a process for yourself, I mean, I'm not going to stand in your way, but that the chairman
But
has
I
the
can do
authority to
that,
call a
right?
meeting.
But the chairwoman can be one of the 3. So I could call him, Dr. Schiff is interested in knowing if you want to call a meeting on X. As long as 3 other members, irrespective, it could be the chair, it could be somebody else. She can act as somebody agreeing to call the meeting, even if she's not calling it, as one of the 3, right? So I think that's,
The statute uses the word other board members, so.
it has to be someone other than
So-
Mrs. Zork.
Because Mrs. Zork, as sitting as the chairman, has the authority to call a meeting and doesn't need 2 others to call the meeting.
Got it. So if I request a meeting, it has to be also called for by either Mrs. Justice, well, by at least 2 of Mrs. Justice, Mrs. Rosario, or Mrs. Barrenberg,
There must be at least 3 other board members in favor of holding the
not
meeting.
including Mrs. Zork.
Yes.
2 others, not including Mrs. Zork. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Let's move on. Mrs. Barrenborg, did you have a comment?
And thank you for saying
before we-
Barenborg. Since we're getting things straight, that's my name, Barenborg. Thank
By the
you.
way, I'm Dr. Schiff, not Mrs. Schiff, never have been Mrs. Schiff, sorry.
I did say Barrenborg, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Go ahead.
Let's take a deep breath. I want to work together as a team. I'm all about team. I've been a coach. I'm all about team. We need to move and have a fresh start and move as a team, please. With that being said, I saw some teamwork this past week at the All County Music Festival that was outstanding. And not only were the 5th graders so outstanding and on key and perfect and everything else, and all those hardworking music teachers that we have in our district, I just go on and on about the talent that they bring out in kids, and I know those teachers are bringing that out. But I also like to say hats off to Gifford, because their band and their orchestra and their choral group were fantastic as well. So it was a really nice event, and it's nice my kids were in it, so it's been going on for a lot of years. But it's nice to see that it's still going on and still a tradition. They mentioned that it was the 3rd year, so I imagine that there was a gap, but it's back, so I'm glad to see that. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent's closing, Dr. Rendell?
I don't have anything to add, Madam Chair.
Okay. This meeting is adjourned at 8:58.